Hey everyone, Carolina here. Just before the episode starts, I wanted to give a quick trigger warning and spoiler warning for the show. We talk about BoJack Horseman today, and if you're unfamiliar with it, the show delves into some pretty tough topics, including suicide, addiction, abortion, miscarriage, pretty much any upsetting topic you can think of. So if for some reason you don't want to hear about that or you haven't seen the show, it might be a good idea to skip this episode. Just wanted to give that warning up front. Okay, enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the Feature Length Podcast, a podcast in which we discuss different movies and TV shows for about the length of a feature film. And today, for the first time in a while, we're discussing a television show. The show in question, as you can see from the title, is BoJack Horseman. And for those of you who don't know, BoJack Horseman is an animated tragicomedy, Wikipedia's words, not mine, about a horse named BoJack Horseman, a washed-up, depressed, alcoholic, drug and food and sex addicted 90s sitcom star, and it's about his attempt to become relevant again by writing a book about his life. The show spanned 6 seasons on Netflix, and during the show, it obviously moved beyond the writing a book storyline. That one ended in season 1, and then depicted his life and struggles in and with Hollywood, which turned into Hollywoo. It's a long story. If you didn't watch it, we might talk about it. And some of the other main characters include a 24-year-old asexual human stoner who he lives with named Todd Chavez, his agent and ex-girlfriend, a cat named Princess Carolyn, his ex-rival, a golden retriever named Mr. Peanut Butter, and his ghostwriter, who is also the fiance and then wife and then ex-wife of Mr. Peanut Butter, and at one point, someone that BoJack loved, Diane Nguyen. So now here to talk about it with me are Dan.
Hello.
And Marco.
Whoa! Marco, Dan, and Carolina in the same Zoom call? What is this, a recording session for the feature-length podcast? Am I Jimmy Stewart in a 1946 Christmas movie? Because it's a wonderful life.
Oh my god.
Guys, thank you for letting me do that. Oh my god, I wrote that like a week ago, and I was so excited.
I'm taking a drink from my alcoholic beverage for the audio listeners.
Thanks for warning us that you were going to do that. Not the specifics, but that There was a joke. I'm glad I was prepared.
It was a great joke. I worked real hard on it.
But yeah, welcome guys. Good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Who wants to talk about your experience with this television show?
Well, Dan, this was your first time watching it, so why don't you enlighten us with your thoughts?
Right. So I didn't really decide to watch it because of the show. That was sort of an afterthought. I heard lots of good things, so I decided to start watching this show, expecting it would be sort of like along the lines of animated comedies like, The Simpsons or Family Guy or something like that. I did not expect this show to be as existential as it turned out to be. This is a very, very deep show. It may not seem it at first, but it is very, very deep. I enjoyed it thoroughly, but also, we need to get this point out there right away. It's also hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is funny. Still a comedy.
Yeah.
First and foremost, but it hits hard at times, and I can't recommend it enough, especially for people who, like me, might think that it's just like another generic, animated comedy sitcom when it's really not.
Yeah, good points.
Nice.
Marco?
Yeah, I also love the show. I've seen the show in its entirety twice now. The first time I watched it was at a very specific point in life, post-graduating university, pre-starting my job. And I had just free time. So I watched the whole show in that sitting, and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't know if I was ever really going to go back to it, because it kind of struck me as one of those things where maybe I just saw it at the right point in life, and I didn't know if I would get the same things out of it, because that's definitely happened to me before with stuff where you watch something again later and you're like, I don't like it as much now that I've grown up a little bit. But I did watch it again, obviously, for this, and got just as much, if not more, out of it, albeit probably in different sections of the show. And I fully believe now, after 2 rewatches, that this is one of those shows that you can watch at any point in your life and get something out of it, outside of it just being hilarious. Like we talked about, it is very funny. There are so many moments in the show where I legitimately laugh out loud just sitting alone in my room because they really hit hard. Such a great cast. Guest stars, we'll get into all that. Guest voices, insane. But I just think, like, emotionally, to what Dan's talking about, it covers so much, and I think no matter, like, where you are, unless you're, like, a child, like, I would assume...
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe, like, over the age of, like, 16.
Yeah, if you're, like, over the age of 16, I feel like there is something in here for you. There's some character in here that has something relatable to you, even if it's just, like, one specific arc, because the show does kind of have arcs, or whatever. There's something in here. Maybe, hopefully, your life is not as dark as BoJack's, but I'm sure that there is something relatable in this for everyone. But yeah, I love it. I think it's great, hilarious. I highly recommend everyone watches it. It's great.
Yeah, so my history with it, I watched it between Netflix releasing the 5th and 6th season at some point. I don't know what time period that was or how long of a time period it was, but that's when I watched it, because then I remember I watched the 6th season as it came out. And yeah, I liked it a lot. I watched it because it was highly recommended to me by some friends, and I liked it a lot. But I need to fess up immediately, because I think this is the first time that this has come up on the podcast, because we haven't done, I think, anything animated. But I don't... Something about animated things. Not that I dislike them, because before anyone starts to shit on me, I love this show. I rewatched part of it. I'll get into how much I was able to rewatch.
Okay.
I love this show. It's great. So that's the first caveat. But for some reason,
I'm curious to see where this is going.
Yeah, I think when I watch animated things, I find it harder to relate to the characters and topics and emotions, maybe because, like, you can't see it play out on their faces as you do with, like, human actors in things, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's why even when there's, like, a really great animated film, like Inside Out, Marco and I went to see that together. It was awesome, you know? But I never am like, I love it, it's one of my favorite films, I'm gonna rewatch it. I never, like, cry as hard. I laugh a lot, but, like, they never, like, stick with me as much as things with live action things do. And I don't know why. And I know there's a lot of great animated things, and everyone always gets mad at me, and I watch them and they're always, like, fine, you know, like, they're okay. I enjoyed it. I guess I'm glad I watched them, but I also honestly could have lived without them. So then, with that point in mind, you guys are like, or Dan had watched BoJack and was like, let's do it on the podcast, because, you know, it was good. And I was like, yeah, I remember it, like, being, like, you know, good. Like, I watched the whole thing, and, like, it was an animated thing. It was fine. But then we were supposed to record last week for a behind the scenes. But then I got my shot. It didn't happen anyway. And I didn't have time to rewatch anything. But I had that extra week, and I watched all of season 1 and 2, and then the last 2 episodes of season 6. And I'm glad I did, because I liked them a lot more.
Good.
And was able not to relate to it more, but I feel like maybe I paid more attention this time. Maybe I was watching it in the background the last time I watched it. I don't really remember, but it just didn't really, like, sit with me as much as even just the 2 seasons and 2 episodes I rewatched this time did. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm glad I had that extra time to watch more, because I have more to bring to the conversation, and I liked it a lot more. But yeah, in general, something about animated stuff doesn't get in my brain like other things do. But yeah, that's my history with it. I did not rewatch it all, which is why in our group chat, people have been asking me opinions about things, and I have not been able to answer because I haven't rewatched it all.
It's all good.
But I read all the Wikipedia.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Basically, like I did. I have seen it before.
Yeah,
I remember the general arcs. I made note of them.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And we've been constantly touching on the major plot points throughout, so...
Yeah, Dan was giving some live reacts in the chat, so... So that was good and necessary.
Glad that you've enjoyed it more, like, this time around.
Yeah, and even, like you mentioned, like, you already enjoyed it more, and you haven't even, like just from those 2 seasons and a couple episodes alone.
Yeah, I was, like, bummed I wasn't able to rewatch it all. I'll probably keep watching it after we record this episode.
Well, given the circumstances, you know.
Yeah.
Like you said, It was for the sake of the vaccine. We're all double vaxxed. Go get your vaccines if you can.
Yes,
Everyone,
please.
please. I want to go back to doing things in the world.
The feature-length podcast endorses
Yes,
vaccinations.
100%.
In case that wasn't clear.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, where do we begin, guys? We got 6 seasons of this show that tackles a lot.
A lot.
Of really heavy
Yes,
topics.
there is a lot.
With a lot of
So-
really funny jokes.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, do we want to do our little guessing game of trying to guess
Absolutely.
each other's favorite episodes?
Yes.
Okay. Who wants to go first?
Pulling up Wikipedia again.
All right. So I'm going to guess. I'll guess first if you guys would
Okay.
like.
Okay, Marco's going
Okay,
first.
so just a little prelude here, because we were talking about this in the chat, but we decided to leave it for the podcast because content. And both mine and Carol's favorite episode are from season 4, and Dan's favorite episode is from season 3, correct? Okay.
Yes. Sorry to be the
No,
contrary.
it's all good. It's all
How
good.
dare you?
Like, there are probably, like, 5 episodes of the show that, like, I could consider being, like, someone's favorite episode, because they're just
Yeah.
that good. But, okay, so I'm going to try and guess first. We'll see what happens. So, Carol... See, I'm really tempted to guess...
Oh, and we can't say, like, don't confirm
Okay.
Yeah,
because I still have to
Gotcha.
guess.
So, Carol, here's the thing. I'm really tempted to guess the episode that's my favorite episode from season 4.
Of course.
But that's incredibly biased. So,
I know. I would want to do the same
I'm
thing
not
for
gonna
you, so
guess
that's why I
one.
had to pull up the episode list.
I am going to guess for Carol, and again, we're not confirming or denying till the end. Times Arrow, which I believe is either the second last or last episode of season 4. Just for a refresher for anyone, it's after Hollyhock has been taken away because of the drug overdose, and then BoJack takes his mother to the home, and then we get flashbacks to Beatrice, who's BoJack's mother, as a young girl, and like the stuff that she went through and how she ended up with BoJack's dad. Well, she's suffering dementia, and BoJack's putting her in the home, and whatever. That whole episode. That was my guess for you, and then for Dan, season 3. I'm guessing, I forget the name of the episode, but it's the second last episode. It's the one where Sarah Lynn dies in the planetarium. Those are my 2 guesses for you guys.
Okay. Carol, do you want to go next, or do you want me to go next?
You should go next. I'm still trying to think of what might be
Okay.
Marco's. I think I have a guess for you, though.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I was going to guess the same for both of you because you both said season 4, and it wouldn't be biased for me because I'm not either one of you. But then Marco said he's not going to guess his favorite for Carol's, and I was going to guess Times Arrow for both of you.
Ooh,
I'm still going to guess that for Carol
interesting.
because I have to assign that to at least
It's
one
an
of you,
amazing
'cause
episode.
It's an amazing
Yeah,
episode,
it is
but
really good.
now I have to think let me look up the episode list for Marco's
Okay.
now. Give me a second. I have a backup, and I think I'm going to go with that, which is probably... I just need to see what the name of the episode is. Okay, I'm going to guess for Marco, then the second episode of season 4, The Old Sugarman Place, which is basically... It's the one where BoJack visits Michigan, his old summer home, or not his old summer home, but his mother's old summer home, and fixes it up as a therapeutic thing.
Okay.
So those are my guesses for now.
Okay.
Okay. Now I feel bad about guessing second because I swear to God, Dan, before you said it, I was going to guess that for Marco, too. I was also going to guess...
Well, you could still guess that.
Yeah, so I was going to guess that Marco's favorite was also The Old Sugarman Place.
Okay.
And for Dan, actually, I'm going to guess maybe your favorite episode is Fish Out of Water, the one that takes place at the Pacific Ocean Film Festival that's basically silent.
I just want to say before anyone answers, that was my backup for Dan.
Yeah.
I was debating this in my head.
It's a good one.
And I was
It's
like,
a standout
I
one.
think I have to go with the Sarah Lynn one, but that was a very close second for me, for Dan.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, are we ready to show our
Ready
hands?
to reveal?
Who goes first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Marco, you go first because you guessed first.
You guys are both correct. The Old Sugarman Place is my
Yes.
favorite episode.
Nice.
We can get into the details of it after we've all talked about it, but
Yeah, we can each dive into our own
yeah, we should
favorite
do it.
episodes.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it very much is kind of like a 2-parter with Times Arrow almost, even though they kind of bookend the season because it has to do like with Beatrice's like flashbacks to her life, and so like it's kind of a 2-parter that way, and then also like BoJack like seemingly like having this therapeutic experience and having this slightly positive note, and then like everything going to shit again at the end. Yeah, I just think it's a really wonderful standalone episode. I'll get into some of the other random details after about why I like it, but yeah, that's mine. You guys got me to a T, so congrats.
Hell yeah.
I like how you mentioned it. It's kind of it's almost like a two-parter with Time Zero, because me having only seen the show once, thinking back, I have gotten some of the plot points of each episode sort of intertwined, like mixed up with each, because they are both like heavily flashback based.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so mine, Marco got it right.
Yeah, I knew it.
Nice.
It's That's Too Much Man, that's what it's which is where Sarah Lynn dies in the planetarium as a result of BoJack taking her on a months-long drug bender.
Yeah.
And I love this episode because it's like, for me, it was still, I mean, like, he took someone's life. That is the biggest low that he hit in the series for me. And also, I like the idea of BoJack experiencing those months of when they were just like traveling across the country, like high as all hell, and like him experiencing it in blackouts.
Yeah.
To span months, like that's wild.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, it's my favorite episode.
Okay. And also, I haven't actually gotten to season 4, so that's why, with an asterisk, this is my favorite episode. It probably will change upon rewatch. But both of you were wrong.
Damn.
Ooh.
My favorite episode, and simply because before I rewatched anything, just looking back, I don't know why, but the only one I could vividly remember was episode 7 of season 4, Underground, when Mr. Peanut Butter's house falls underground because he
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, that one's
That
great.
is such a great episode.
In this house with like all of his ex-wives, and like, yeah, so I just remember that one, I think, because of the chaos, and it was really funny. No really emotional ties. But yeah, that's my favorite episode.
I was not expecting that.
I was not either, but
answer.
you know what? I get it. I have to say, like, on this rewatch, that episode definitely stood out to me this time around, because, like, something that stood out to me this time around in general was just the whole Mr. Peanut Butter running for governor arc. Like, that whole first episode where it just keeps escalating, and eventually they're in this, like, skiing contest to see who's...
It's so stupid.
And then they both lose, but Todd, like, defers it, so they have to have an election. I was like, the pain Woodchuck was going through that whole election was just so funny.
I have to say this right now. I think Mr. Peanut Butter is my favorite character on the show.
He's so funny, dude.
And like he was someone who grew on me. Like he wasn't at first, but by the end.
Yeah. I love the way he speaks. Like, I know I made fun of it in the intro, but just like constantly like making like movie title references to explain how he's feeling, or even the whole just a crossover episode thing. Like, that's just really funny.
The thing with Mr. Peanut Butter is, in the first season, most of the first season, I thought he was just being like a dick to BoJack. And then as the show goes on, you realize, no, he's just really stupid.
Yes.
He's actually pretty nice. He's just really dumb.
It's true.
Well, it's interesting because apparently initially they wanted him to be like a deep-voiced jock. Like whoever was playing him, and I think that would have been a totally different tone. They couldn't have made him as dumb. He wouldn't have been as lovable. He wouldn't have brought as much levity.
And that's where I thought it was going.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it ended up the way it did. Because I don't know, it would have been a totally different show if it was some deep-voiced jock dude as Mr. Peanut Butter. I don't know. I think it would have ruined it.
Yeah, I would not have enjoyed that as much, for sure. Because then it just would have seemed like... Look, what I really appreciate is... like, obviously how much BoJack like hates him, and anytime he's around he's like, oh my god. But it like, it's funnier because Mr. Peanut Butter is genuinely just like oblivious and like and
he like wants to hang out
like he
with
has
him.
no idea. Whereas if he was like a jock, I'd be like, oh, he's just being a dick, like on purpose. So it makes it funnier, like the stupidity that he has about everything. But Carol, something like about your episode is that kind of blew my mind. I never realized it was like a lot of the like guest stars. So like I knew that there were like real celebrities that were in the show.
Yeah.
Not all of them are actually voiced. Like there's like Quentin Tarantulino or something like that.
Yeah.
Which like that one was really funny, but obviously not voiced by Quentin Tarantino. But in that episode,
Can you imagine?
Oh my god, I wish it was voiced by him. But in that episode, Jessica Biel and Zach Braff are both actually voiced by Jessica Biel and Zach Braff, which is
Famous star Zach Braff.
hilarious because Zach Braff gets cannibalized, he gets eaten, and Jessica Biel is a psychopath, and I was like, how did these fucking people voice themselves? That's so funny.
And Zach Braff even comes back for the pre-finale episode. Which I was also surprised about, to be a butler in
So funny.
whatever limbo they were in. But yeah, no, it's really fun.
Some of the other guest stars include Daniel Radcliffe during that game show episode.
Mm-hmm.
Insane that he was just
Played
there,
himself.
to play himself. There's other crazy people playing themselves. Oh, character actress Margot Martindale. That one, that's my favorite running joke.
I love that.
And she's so important. Yeah.
It's so funny.
She does so many pivotal
I know.
things.
Oh my god. So good. Also, I love the Vincent Adultman
Oh my god.
arc.
But okay, the fact that Princess Carolyn couldn't tell. I feel like we need to give
we haven't even talked
backstory
about
to all of
we
that.
haven't even talked about Princess Carolyn yet. Let's start diving into the characters for some context here.
So we didn't even really talk about any of the characters
No.
yet.
Not
at all.
really.
We should talk about
So
them.
maybe we should start with BoJack.
Yeah, he's the titular
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is for context for anyone who hasn't seen the show, but we're going to give a quick little backstory for each of the major characters.
Yeah.
So starting with BoJack. BoJack Horseman was, back in the 90s, he was on a very famous TV show
Nice, Dan.
called Horsin' Around. Thanks. Which is basically like a spoof on Full House or other corny 90s sitcoms. So obviously he's very washed up in the modern day. And he is now an alcoholic, drug addicted. What?
He is an alcoholic, drug addicted.
Yeah,
asshole.
well, he is.
Yeah.
Yes. And he lives with this person named Todd.
Yeah. He's my
Played by
favorite
Aaron Paul.
character.
Oh, he's so good.
He's great. Played by Aaron Paul, who's basically Jesse from Breaking Bad, except, and these are Marco's words, not mine, except he's a stoner instead of a tweaker.
Yeah.
But Todd is, his deal is he was at a Halloween party of BoJack's years ago and just sort of stayed one night, and now he lives there.
Well, his parents kicked him out because they didn't respect his lifestyle, and
Yeah.
BoJack thought his lifestyle was he was gay or something, but it was really just that he was lazy. So he lives on BoJack's couch and
I
does
love
nothing.
For years. Oh, by the way, BoJack has a mansion in the Hollywood Hills.
Because he is washed up, but he is still rich.
Oh yeah, I mean he's filthy rich. Yeah.
Those residuals, baby.
Exactly.
Mr. Peanut Butter, who we already kind of started talking about a little bit, had I'll call it a rival sitcom.
Identical
basically,
sitcom.
Pardon?
An identical almost sitcom.
Basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Also, so the premise of Horsin' Around was. Actually, you know what? There's one detail we have to talk about. So, in this world, humans and anthropomorphic animals
Yes.
exist side by side, and that's just a normal thing. They talk, it's just you have to understand that. So, in this show, Horsin' Around, BoJack was the father of 3 human orphans, and that was the central idea of the show. Mr. Peanut Butter had a rival sitcom. I forget what it was. Oh, Mr. Peanut Butter's House. It was something really
Yeah.
And it was the same idea where he's a dog and he had 2 human orphans. But Mr. Peanut Butter has always just respected BoJack for his work despite all the shitty things he's done. And as we were talking about before, he's just so oblivious. And at first you might think he's being purposely, he's just trolling him on purpose. But no, he's just an idiot. And he's always just wanted the respect from BoJack back. However, he is dating the character Diane, who we really haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
And in season 1, Diane is hired by BoJack to write his autobiography because he's once again a washed-up celebrity who is missing that time when the spotlight was on him. So he's like, I'll have an autobiography written about me. It'll put me back out there and maybe I'll start to get more work. So he hires Diane, then realizes that she is dating Mr. Peanut Butter, his arch nemesis. And then I think the last of the major characters to touch on is Princess Carolyn, who is BoJack's agent, and she has a history of dating BoJack, because that is also part of his unhealthy lifestyle of just sleeping with every woman that he comes across, basically, like hitting on them. So of course he had a relationship with his Hollywood agent, and they have that sort of baggage between each other. Very unhealthy agent and what's it called?
Client?
What's the
Talent?
client agent-client relationship? And yeah, I think that's good to start
The main
off
cast?
with.
Yeah.
But yeah, am I missing anyone?
Nah, I
I
think
think those are the main ones.
that's probably the main one. There's like I feel like every season kind of has their own like new cast member that'll show up for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like especially in the later seasons, like I think like Gina is his co-star in season 5
Oh,
of
yeah.
Philbert, which we'll talk about when we talk. That's one of my favorite arcs in the show. I adore that. But yeah, something I really appreciate about the show though, like the way it starts. Like we're talking about we can go season by season and I guess hit like the main characters.
I think that's best.
Probably the best stuff. Season 1 really is kind of like the closest the show ever gets to being just like a normal TV show / sitcom. Because yeah, it's like about this washed up star and everything you just detailed, Dan, and like having him, you know, this girl's gonna write his autobiography, but she's dating his arch nemesis and yada yada. And what I really appreciate is that the show like really like takes big changes pretty much at the end of every season in terms of like the status quo with all the characters and what's going on. And so season 1 feels the most normal, and it, you know, I mean, it's hilarious. Like, not to diminish it, it's still an incredibly funny season of television. But it definitely is like the most normal, and really the only part of season 1 that starts to get into the really like existential stuff in BoJack is when he meets with Herb, who Herb was his like in the 90s his best friend, and the like co-creator, no, I guess just creator of Horse and Around. He was the showrunner, and you know, as some context, he ended up getting fired from the show, which we will later find out. I don't remember if we find out in season 1 or if it's later.
It's later.
Okay, he ends up getting pushed out of the show because he was gay. He was publicly came out as gay, and it was the 90s, and so the network, whatever network, pushed him out. And you know, Herb said to BoJack like, "Hey, like if you leave the show, like they won't do it without both of us," type thing. But BoJack decided to stay on, and they kept making the show without Herb, and so they never really made up. And so like season 1 is ultimately about like Diane learning about BoJack and writing this book about him, and also BoJack I think dealing with the repercussions because Herb has cancer and he's gonna die from cancer, and that's really where the show takes its first turn.
Cancer.
Yeah. That's where the show takes...
Because it's supposed to be a little funny.
Yeah. It takes its first turn, and in the like probably like emotional crux of the first season, which is BoJack going to Herb, and they have this really nice like reminiscent time, and he apologizes, and Herb says like, "No, I'm not gonna forgive you. Like you completely fucked over me and like ruined my entire life. Like why would I just like give you closure and forgive you?"
And he's like, he specifically said, "You have to live with that shitty thing that you did."
Yeah.
Which is like the first real cool thing I think the show does, and I think feeds into kind of the arc of the first season, which is BoJack like trying to understand whether or not he's actually like a good person. Like he thinks he's like he even says like when he's talking to Diane, like deep down, like I'm a good person. I need you to tell me that. And Diane, like after writing this book, after writing this book about him that really paints him to be an asshole, she's like, I can't because I don't believe in deep down. Like I think like you are just whatever choices you make, so make better choices, which goes on to become like a big theme of the whole show of, you know, stop making excuses. And really that's like BoJack's main character flaws, that he like throughout each season is constantly making bad choices and then feels bad about them, but like still continues to make bad choices and slowly starts to lose people. Like everyone around him kind of pulls away until he's just kind of left with nobody because he's just a piece of shit. And then by the time he finally does like try to reform, like all the way in season 6, it's kind of too late, and he has to deal with the consequences of all the things that have happened that, it is what it is, and everything's coming out, and he's got to deal with it, so.
See, that's also part of the beauty of me only watching season 1 and 2, and then the finale is you kind of see his initial wrongdoings to people. Like in the first season, Todd has an opportunity to put on this rock opera set in space.
Yes.
That's really funny. And this is the first introduction of character actress Margot Martindale to get him addicted to a video game so that he never finishes his final song for it. BoJack hires her to do that just because BoJack doesn't want to lose Todd.
Yeah.
Just in case Todd's play took off and he was able to make money and move out and find success without him. And that was obviously he lashed out because of his own insecurity, and he didn't want to lose his only friend, even though he doesn't outwardly consider Todd a friend. He considers him a nuisance who lives on his couch, but obviously he likes any attention he can get.
Yeah.
And also in the first season, he falls in love with Diane, or thinks he falls in love with Diane. He probably just, it's the only person who listens to him and knows the most about him at this point. So he convinces himself he loves her. But anyway, to him, he loves her, and he kisses her even though she's engaged to Mr. Peanut Butter by the end of the season. And just kind of seeing those initial lashings out at the two people closest to him at the time, then to watch the ending, which I'm sure we're going to talk about it in more depth, but essentially he is still cordial with these people, but they're not in his life day to day, and they probably won't be ever again.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but I like that the show never throughout the whole run of it ever sugarcoated anything. Obviously they had to make it hilarious so that people watched and didn't just sob through the whole thing, but it is very realistic throughout, also despite the fact that it's animals and half of it's set underwater. And I think that's part of the beauty of it and why I'm appreciating it more on the second watch. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, well, and here's what I appreciate the most about BoJack's arc from season 1 onwards, right, is...
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit last week, but it's not just him being a bad person and then understanding he's a bad person and trying to be better. Even within him starting to try to be better, which I guess we could say probably happens I think really after the Charlotte stuff in season 2. So in season 2, BoJack, there's a lot of stuff going on, but basically at the end of season 2, he goes to visit this old friend that he had with Herb, and now... because he wants to have a relationship with her, and then this friend has a daughter who is high school age, and he ends up taking this daughter to prom, and then weird stuff happens. I don't even know how to explain it. Basically, he is this weird figure for the daughter, so she starts to come on to him, and initially he says no, but then he starts to hit on his old friend, the mom, and then Charlotte, and then Charlotte turns him down, and then he eventually does seek that validation with the daughter, and nothing actually ends up happening because I feel that would have been a line too far in terms of okay, this person is literally just how do you even have this person be the protagonist of the show anymore?
But the point is that's made afterwards is he even asks if Charlotte hadn't walked in on us and discovered us, would I have gone further?
Exactly, and I think that's the first of okay, now I have to try to be a better person. And then Sarah Lynn dies, and it's now I have to try to be a better person, and then...
Oh, we should
mention. Being one of the kids.
Let's rewind a little bit. So Sarah Lynn was the youngest actress on Horse and Around, and she played the youngest daughter. In season 1, and now she's in her 30s, in season 1, 3rd episode, I think, BoJack sleeps with her.
Yeah.
Which is actually that's really the first moment in the show where it's what the fuck. Yeah. It's super messed up. Fast forward to season 3. I think the circumstances are BoJack thinks he's nominated for an Oscar for his work on a movie he was filming in season 2.
Yes.
Secretariat.
But then
which is
Secretariat,
his role model, a racehorse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Secretariat in this world is just a talking runner. Yeah. It's still.
But also a horse.
Anyway.
Voiced by John Krasinski.
Still a horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in season 3, he thinks he's nominated for the Oscar, the Best Actor Oscar, finds out that he actually isn't because of some Mr. Peanut Butter antics that went down.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's right.
There was a mistake. there was a mix-up. So he goes on this huge bender like we were talking about, and this leads to my favorite episode in the series where he and Sarah Lynn travel the country just getting wasted because he calls up Sarah Lynn because he knows that she will
indulge with him.
Exactly,
also,
yeah.
Important to point out, she's been sober. She got sober before this.
Yes.
Because she was
yeah,
drug addicted and alcohol addiction,
and he brought her back down because he was
Yeah.
suffering. So they travel across the country. They even go and visit / spy on Charlotte's daughter again. Her name's Penny, right? The daughter. So that's super sketchy. And then the episode results in Sarah Lynn ODing as a direct result of BoJack. He didn't kill her, but he might as well have. And that was the first time he was responsible for taking a life, which, like I mentioned before, that's the lowest low, or at least the new lowest low in the series.
I like how, and then from that point forward, I think the show does a really good job with BoJack in particular of showing the complications that come with redemption, and not in necessarily a traditional storytelling way. So, for example, I talked about my favorite episode being the old Sugarman Ranch. Is that what it's called? Place? The old Sugarman Place?
Something like that.
Which, okay, for a couple of reasons. One, this is a really weird one, but, I hate nature. I do not enjoy going out in nature. If I had to go in a cabin...
Oh, you hate
I hate being
in
nature. Yeah, I don't actively hate nature. I just hate being in nature.
How have I never known this?
Have you ever seen me go camping or go out of my basement?
Yes, but I just assume
I mean,
it's because we live in Windsor and where is there to go?
I've seen you outside.
No, I don't. I don't love roughing it. That's not me. That's not my lifestyle.
Okay.
That being said,
Good to know.
I really enjoy, if you want to say person versus nature, story arcs. You know how there's person versus self, or person versus person versus. I like person versus
I remember grade 10 English class. Thank you.
I know,
very
yeah,
much.
there you go, grade 10 English. So Robinson
I don't.
Crusoe was one of my favorite stories as a kid about this guy that gets shipwrecked and is on an island and has to fend for himself and whatever. So I really just generally love the story of a person going, even though I don't love to be in nature, secluding themselves in nature and just having to live and fend for themselves, and that is a metaphor for finding themselves. But something that happens in that episode that's great, that continually happens throughout the show, is it gives you both the traditional thing of this was a therapeutic experience for BoJack, and he built this house back up, and now he's destroying it, and he's ready to move on with his life. And at the end of that episode, it's BoJack's going to be a better person. But then it also shows the complicated side of well, it's not that easy because you are responsible for someone's death, and you're a creep, and also addiction doesn't just go away, and it's something you have to actively work towards. So it gives you both the regular storytelling stuff, but then also shows how complicated it is. Which leads all the way up into the ending, which, like Carol was pointing out, is I think why the ending's so great is, that BoJack is, getting better and trying to be better, but ultimately, has lost people and is not going to necessarily get those people back, and, life goes on, and you just have to, actively keep working towards being better. One thing I want to say from season 1, though, Dan, when Diane says, I don't believe in, a deep down, I think, you are simply whatever actions you choose to make. I was that is
wait, I know what you're gonna
eerily
say.
similar to Batman Begins. That is very, very close to it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. I was very close, but it's okay. It's great, so it's no problem.
Are you trying to say one was inspired by the other?
Well, all I'm saying is Batman Begins came out in 2005, so it's possible. It's possible.
Okay, but there's only so many ways to say the same thing, Marco.
I know.
Time Zero is a funny thing. Who knows? But I want to mention on this topic while we're still talking about this, at the end of season 2 is, so despite the Sarah Lynn death episode being my favorite episode, I think my favorite moment comes from the season 2 finale. Mm-hmm. It's the very literally the very last shot. So BoJack, after this whole Penny thing, he returns to Los Angeles and starts to try and better himself by jogging, just as an example. and he's like, wow, this sucks, and he like almost passes out on the side of the road. And there's this really old guy who's like a jogger, and he comes up to him. And he's like, I'm trying to remember exactly.
He says,
what the line was.
"It gets better, but you have to do it every day. That's the hard part."
That's the hard part. And then BoJack he looks up like at the camera and basically like in the most accepting, like, I'm actually going to try and get better way. He's like, okay, like very, like, this is the start of the rest of his life. And even though it's far from the last bad thing that he does in the show, that is the most uplifting moment, I think, for me in the whole show. It's just so inspiring.
Yeah. I like when the show can give those moments and then like take them away, but like take them away in a really like brilliant way where and
because the other thing, sorry, real quick, just because the other thing is every season pretty much, like the second last episode is like the big episode where like something tragic or really horrible happens, and then the finale is sort of like this, more of like an epilogue to the season of like tying all the season arcs up. So that being part of the last episode of the season is sort of part of that, where like the Penny thing has happened. Now he's going to start to move on for the future of the show, and every season is like that. And I like that structure, how it's sort of, they use the last episode to sort of tidy everything up that's went down in the season. Yeah,
I think that's a great way of doing it. And there are, like you said, there's a few examples of that. I think that moment is a really kind of like uplifting one. I personally, like, for the old Sugarman place, like him destroying the house and leaving and like going back to his life, to me was another uplifting moment of like this was his cathartic, like, I'm done with this, I'm gonna stop letting this control my life, and I'm ready to be better. And then the other one that I think is probably like the saddest is in season 6, kind of like at the midpoint of season 6, where he's like has his life together almost, and like you can even see that with like he stopped dyeing his hair and he's not wearing the clothes that he wore in the 90s. He's like
is this the second half of season 6?
It's like right in the middle of season 6, but yeah, like it kicks off the second half, and like he's now a professor at this school and he really is like good at it and gets along with his students, and it feels like,
and his relationship with his sister is
gotten
like
a lot better.
Healthy.
He has a sister,
Hollyhock.
Yes, because we were going through the seasons.
It's too hard,
and then we stopped.
It's too
there's
hard.
A lot. So there's a
well, we don't discover Hollyhock until season 4.
Or is it season 4 or season 3?
I think it's 4.
4.
Okay. Well, yeah. So BoJack thinks he has a daughter, but it turns out to be his sister because his father had an affair with the maid?
Yeah, the maid.
Yeah.
And they were going to try to force the maid to get an abortion, but she didn't. And then that child is named Hollyhock and is BoJack's sister, who has 8 fathers.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another funny joke that I enjoy. That's another...
Actually, that the end of season 4 is another sort of uplifting moment where, like, you think because Hollyhock moves away to go to school, like she just came to LA to find out who her father was, but found out that BoJack is her brother.
Yes.
And you sort of think, oh, maybe now this is over, they're never going to talk to each other again. And she's like, well, I've never had a brother before. And BoJack just sort of smiles, and then it cuts to black. And that's sort of another nice little uplifting season finale.
They always like you to think it's going to get better.
And then it doesn't. Yes. That's the whole point. I know that's the point, but it's like, it just sucks.
It keeps giving you hope so that you're not just in a pit.
Yeah. I mean, what happens with Hollyhock sucks. That's like one of the, not like sucks in like a I don't like the way the show handled it way, but it's just another one of the like sad things that happens where like she by the end of the show just wants nothing to do with him anymore. It doesn't even like call him to say it, just writes him a letter. And then that's like sends him on this other like this next binge that he goes on after he's been sober, and it's just like, oh, it's tough, man. Depression.
Okay, see, because I didn't rewatch it, what happened again with her at the end? I know, like, because he was working at the school she
at the very
attended,
end?
yeah?
Yes, correct.
And then what?
So she goes to New York for some party, and she meets up with the kid, Pete, who was part of, he went to school with Penny.
Yes.
And on prom night, so as we mentioned before, BoJack and Penny went to prom together, and then her friend Pete and her other friend's
Pete.
name.
Or Pete Repeat.
Pete Repeat, yeah.
Right,
Who
yes.
never
I
actually
forget.
repeated anything he said.
I like how
he did.
after everything he said, he's like, wait, did I repeat that? Oh, damn. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, it's so good.
Anyway, so he goes with his date. I can't remember what her name was, but they go like sort of together as like a double prom date thing. And BoJack, being the irresponsible adult that he is, gets his date like violently ill from drinking. So she has to go to the hospital, and then he sort of abandons them there.
Yeah.
And later on, fast forward to season 6, Hollyhock happens to bump into this person at a party, and you're like, oh shit, that's the character from season 2, and he tells her about this story of this horse guy who once abandoned his prom date and him at a hospital because she got really drunk. She puts 2 and 2 together, oh, it's BoJack, and he also, I think he reveals to her about how he came on to Penny, the 17-year-old. So that starts to drive the rift between Hollyhock and BoJack.
Yeah. And then it's...
I remember now.
Then they still, like, she's weird with him while he's teaching at the school, and he can't really put his finger on why. And then after, like, the whole expose comes out, that's when she finally is like, no, like, we're done. I'm cutting off communication with you. Because, yeah, at the end of the show, like we mentioned, he kind of has his life together a little bit. He's teaching at this school. And then this, like... I don't get this joke. Those 2 reporters that are, like, searching for the answers, and one of them is, like, a pig bride that's, like, talks, like, old-timey, like, hey, I'm gonna get the story from you. And I'm like, what? Like, this is the weirdest...
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
I don't know, like where that joke came from.
They were looking into Sarah Lynn's death, right?
Correct. And then they end up...
led them down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. But I appreciate something that the show does a good job talking about, and it really comes through in that arc, is the idea of, like, performance and being a good person versus like actually wanting to be a good person. And I think it's really exemplified after like that whole expose comes out. He goes and does an interview and gives one interview that's like a really like good honest interview, and he answers the questions, and like the public ends up being like, okay, you answered the questions, cool, we're on your side, we kind of like you and respect you for being honest. But then the attention from that makes him full of himself, so he goes back to do another interview where he just gets absolutely like derailed and looks like an asshole. And then that's the thing that kind of completely, like, he ends up losing his job, and Hollyhock doesn't want anything to do with him. But again, it all comes back to him not understanding how to be a good person, but like doing it for the performance aspect of it. Or even
because the first interview, I think the only thing that came out really in the first interview that he did was that he was there. Like, he was responsible for Sarah Lynn's OD, which isn't like a criminal, not necessarily like, it's more of a Hollywood scandal at that point. But then the second interview is where it comes out that he slept with her, he came on to a 17-year-old, and all the other shitty things that he's done because he got way too ahead of himself. And like you said, he was doing the interview to put on this facade that he's like, oh, he's just super progressive, like, I'm spilling all the beans, so that means you're gonna like me now. And it does not go that way at all.
And I really, one of my favorite episodes is the like feminism episode where like BoJack, like on this, like, I think this is during the whole Philbert arc, which we'll talk about, we have to talk about, but like but BoJack comes out as like a feminist during all that, but it's like the most...
Marco did quotes because
I forget. Like it's the most unquote, like bullshit talking points, just like saying the most ridiculously easy to say things like feminism that Diane like really has a problem with, obviously, as she should, and calls him out again on like the performance of it and being like, you don't care, you don't even know what you're talking about, and like this means nothing. And at one point, like, I forget exactly what happens, but there's a turn in the episode where things get complicated, and BoJack literally says, wait a minute, feminism is supposed to be easy and fun, or like he says something like that, and it's just like, it just goes to show just his complete lack of understanding about like, anything. So, yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so maybe if we want to talk about everything, we should kind of go over more than season 1.
Sure. Well, let's talk about...
What do you want to talk about?
We can maybe just do it like talking about the like big arcs, because I feel like each season just kind of has an arc. So
Yes.
we can probably just like do it that way.
Yeah, we already mentioned that in season 2, BoJack was filming Secretariat, which was his dream role initially. He kind of struggled with the filming of it because it was his first kind of real acting role and not just like shitty jokes to camera. He also witnessed or walked in on his co-star who had accidentally killed himself during this,
Oh,
which
yeah.
seems important.
I forgot
Oh,
about
man.
that.
There was a whole plot line about autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yeah, it's like played off as like this comedic thing, and then the episode ends with
Actual death.
one of the
Yeah.
yes, he's dead.
Yeah. Which I found kind of interesting because something that the show kind of did throughout is it obviously commented on like shit that goes on in Hollywood because it's made by a bunch of these
Hollywood.
Yeah, okay. In the first season, BoJack steals the
Hollywood.
D from the Hollywood sign, and instead of replacing it for the rest of the show, they actually call it Hollywood.
I love that.
But anyway,
Until
Well,
season
at
6,
the very
when they
end.
accidentally replace it with a B, and now it's Hollywood.
Hollywood.
Anyway,
but yeah, so they talk about like real stuff that happens in Hollywood, like overarching issues, like obviously with Sarah Lynn, like being a child star, like that fucked her up. They talk about that. They talk about there's a character called Hank Hippopopoulos, who is known
Right.
or who has been accused by almost all of his like female, I think, assistants or whatever for sexual misconduct. They talk about that and how like who chooses to speak out about it and who doesn't, and how they're silenced for speaking out about it, etc., etc. They talk about like abortion and like miscarriages and just general. So I found it interesting that they're like, no, we need to talk about autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yeah.
Is that a bigger problem in Hollywood than I think? Like, it was just so random. He could have killed himself in a different way, and like we could have still had the arc. That was so weird to me.
I know. It's such a random thing
Maybe
to turn
it's like
into an
in
episode.
the
I don't-
underworld of Hollywood that like we don't know about. Maybe like a lot of stars are into it. I don't know.
Maybe.
It just every other thing they talked about is something that it seems to be very prevalent in Hollywood, and it's coming out more and more. So I don't know. Maybe it's a bigger thing than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
But also not in season 2. Wait, yes, in season 2, BoJack dates
Ooh.
Wanda,
Yes.
voiced by Lisa Kudrow, who is a network executive who was in a coma for 30 years.
who?
Who's
in a
she's
coma?
also
Yeah, she's an owl.
for that joke to make sense. And probably BoJack's first healthy enough relationship for a while.
Kind of.
Healthy enough, as healthy of a relationship as BoJack I think could be in.
But like the main crux was that this person has been oblivious to the last 30 years, so he's like, oh, I can use that sort of power
Yeah.
over her in this relationship dynamic.
Yeah.
And obviously that goes sour. That does not end well. But also, one thing that we kind of skipped over in season 2 was during the filming of Secretariat, he convinces the director, Kelsey,
Yeah.
to do this guerrilla-style shot in
The White.
what was it,
It's
the-
not the White House, but it's like
the Richard Nixon
Yeah.
Museum. So there's like they need like an Oval Office shot, so they break into this Richard Nixon Museum where there's a model of an Oval Office, and it gets Kelsey, the director, fired just very abruptly, and that's another thing that BoJack feels guilty about because he doesn't get fired, but she's off the film.
You know what
now.
my favorite part of that whole thing is how there's that security guard that's very obviously the illegitimate son of Nixon, who then it comes around at the end of the episode, ends up like they use him as Nixon in the shot that they're stealing. Oh my god. It's
Yeah.
such a stupid joke, but it's so funny.
It is so good. But yeah, and also that season ends with the Charlotte thing because BoJack goes to New Mexico. I think that's the main stuff for season 2. That's also when Princess Carolyn dates 3 kids in a trench coat, named.
Oh yeah.
Guys.
The kids call
I
themselves
thought-
Vincent Adult Man.
Yeah.
I was sure that like not arc, but like that storyline was gonna lead to it was just a weird jagged one person in a trench
Yeah.
coat, but no, it actually was just 3 kids in a trench coat this whole time pretending to be an adult.
And
His
everyone
name was
knows
Vincent
it's a child
Adultman.
except for Princess Carolyn, essentially.
Yes.
It's so funny. Oh my god. Like and like how he's just always doing like business stuff or whatever, like on his computer.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things that like you were talking about, Carol, how sometimes you have like don't necessarily have the emotional connection to cartoons, which I understand, but whatever like emotional connection can be lost with cartoons, like that is a joke that only works in a cartoon setting, and it's so funny that it's like, oh, I love it. It just makes me laugh so hard. Just these obvious 3 kids in a trench coat. Oh, it's so good.
But yeah, okay, we talked about season 2. Good job, guys.
We did it.
And real quick, so I forget, is the reason that he runs away to New Mexico and the whole Charlotte thing starts is because he got the director fired? Was that like what pushed him away? Or is there another major thing that happened?
I think like him and Wanda like break up.
Oh, that's what
which
it
I
is,
think was the biggest thing, because I think we even hint at in season 1 like that maybe he kind of had feelings for Charlotte during the flashbacks.
Yeah, he gets high to try and rewrite his book when he doesn't like Diane's initial version.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he has like a hallucination.
With Todd and Sarah Lynn.
Yeah.
And he has a hallucination where he's living with Charlotte and they have like children and he's
Yeah.
happy.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that kind of plants the seed, and yeah, that was also really smart of them. And I found it interesting that they chose to return to it like almost a whole season later, like to the T. But yeah, so he loved her back then, and he thought he could just show up and make his dream a reality, which of course he can't. And he makes it all so much worse. Also, Todd goes to jail at some point.
It doesn't,
But,
like, here's the
it's
thing.
just Todd. Nothing with Todd matters.
It doesn't until
the end.
the asexual stuff, which I really appreciate because
at the beginning he's just kind of like a running gag, like punching bag, like the craziest shit happens to him, and we're just supposed to find it hilarious, even though it's all deeply dramatic.
Exactly. And we'll
also, he has the fucking white power tattoo on him for like the rest of
Yeah,
the
actually?
show.
Kings on the other arm.
That he gets in prison because the story with that episode was he's vying between these 2 prison kings.
Oh, that's so good.
The skinheads and
The Latin Kings.
I forget
The
what
Latin Kings, that's right. Oh, that's good. Something I quickly want to touch on just with the whole New Mexico thing. I like that BoJack's boat is named Escape from LA for a couple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, because obviously it's like a metaphor for what he's doing there in the first place, but 2, Escape from LA is the name of a movie, it's the sequel to Escape from New York, which is like a movie that people like, and Escape from LA is apparently like the really shitty sequel to it. So I enjoyed that as like a fun little thing that like it has 2 meanings. But something else is after everything happens and he leaves LA and he leaves on his boat, he gets in his boat and he sails off. It does something that I love that happens in shows where they use like the theme song from the opening credits in the actual scene. And I wanted to ask you guys a question about this. And by the way, once we're done going through the seasons, I really want to talk about the intro with you guys. But I like when that happens. And like the other one that really stands out to me is Breaking Bad, because like
I was gonna say
you
that
never hear
it's those 2
the Breaking
shows.
Bad theme until the second last episode of Breaking Bad, and it's like it's my favorite moment in all of Breaking Bad where Walt's
Don't
sitting.
spoil anything.
Have you not? Oh fuck, that's right. You haven't seen it. Okay.
I mean, it's not really a spoiler, but
Look.
it's just like this super
Here,
big
I'll take my
decision
headphones off. I need
making.
more water anyway.
Okay,
Talk
you
about
go get
it.
water.
ahead.
I'll talk about
Okay.
it with Dan and the
Okay.
listeners.
Who's editing this
Oh
episode?
shit, Carol's editing this episode. Okay, well
Well, it's not really
I'll
a
talk in
spoiler,
general
but
terms
like
anyway.
yeah.
So at the end of the second last episode of Breaking Bad, long story short, Walt is in a position where he's more or less going to give up. We'll just say that. And then he sees something that kind of like reignites the fire in him to like to finish the thing that he's got to finish, and the episode ends with that music playing, the Breaking Bad theme over this image that again, Carol, we won't get into for spoiler reasons.
I also realized I'm editing the episode.
I know, yeah,
so-
exactly. That was the same thing.
We didn't spoil it.
We didn't spoil it.
But yeah, the point is that's the only time in the series, like outside of the intro, that you
Yes.
actually hear.
And it's
the
so
music.
impactful. Like what I take away in Breaking Bad when I get to that scene and hear that music is like, this is like the last hurrah. You know what I mean? Like this is the last thing, and like fucking Heisenberg is gonna do what he's got to do. Like, what do you guys think about the Escape from LA scene?
It's definitely not the
It's
same
not at
vibe.
all, and also
It's almost
like
the
the
opposite.
BoJack.
It's the
Maybe
newest
we can
low.
talk about this now, like the intro and like the BoJack like theme song,
Okay.
because it's like really weird and really different from any theme song I've ever heard for a TV show. And I don't know what it like means. Like, what's it supposed to mean? What's it supposed to mean in that scene? Because it's even become a thing now on TikTok. It's become a trend on TikTok.
Really?
Yeah, where people will like so the trend is like someone will be saying like, hey, you know when this thing happens, and then another person will go, no, that's never happened to me, and then the other person will just like go and freeze frame, and they'll play like the BoJack music over top of it.
Really?
And so it seems to be like a pretty universal thing of people being like, yeah, this music is like this weird, like interpersonal, like trauma that's only happened to you type thing. But I don't know, like, why or how. So I don't know. Let's talk about the music.
First off, sorry to interrupt. Just as a disclaimer, it started heavily raining, so you're gonna hear some feedback in our audio. That's
Not
all
me.
that is.
Yeah, just
Not
the two-
Carolina, because she's in a
You
different
just
location.
have the constant city noise on my end.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I never really, like, it's interesting that you point out that it's different from any other theme song, because obviously it is. But I never thought about it that hard. I found that, I don't know why, it's just a vibe thing. I find that it's perfect, though.
Yeah.
Like, it feels right. Like, what else could it have been? Like, it
I
can't
know.
be some, like, cheesy pop song from the 90s, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like it has like an indescribable quality to it that like I don't.
It kind of makes you feel gross.
Yeah.
So for me, the intro to a show is supposed to encapsulate the central idea of the show, just generally. And I feel it does that very well. As I said, it sort of makes you feel kind of slimy for some indescribable reason. And I think the use of it in the season 2 finale, which is when we finally get that theme in the like in a scene in the show, when BoJack is riding back to LA after the disgusting thing that he did in New Mexico. It's sort of him tragically accepting, yeah, this is who I am. I'm a piece of shit.
Right.
I'm BoJack Horseman. It's like cue the title theme because this is who I am.
Also,
That's what I get from
I
it.
think, like, the reason it kind of feels weird and different is it uses, like, at the beginning, I'm thinking especially, because I've been playing it in a loop in my head since we started talking about it. Maybe I'll insert a clip in case someone hasn't heard
I also
it.
recently found out it's like a full 4-minute song.
Was it made specifically for the show? Or was it just...
I'm pretty
okay,
sure,
yeah.
but I think so. But like, yeah, there's more song to it.
Huh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll insert a clip for reference. But it starts with, like, noises you just don't hear in music. Like, I don't even know how to describe them. They almost sound like distorted water drops.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that, like, it kind of adds to the, like, unsettling, gross, like, something's not right feeling of it all. Because it's not just, like, strings and piano or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think you guys are making good points here. I'm glad that we are all on the same page, though, about it being like this weird, indescribable thing, but that it so perfectly fits with the tone of the show. Something else I really like about the intros, and then we'll move on from it, is how, like, the intro is basically the same, but it always has, like, certain changing parts. So, for example, there's always a middle part of the intro. So, like, the intro starts with him waking up, like sliding through his house. And then while he's sliding through his house, whoever's in his house is actually representative of, like, who is in his house in real life at that point. So when the show starts, it's, like, Todd, Princess Carolyn, Diane. And then slowly these people start to leave. And, like, by the end of the show, there's literally no one in his house because he's totally alone. Then there's, like, a middle part of the intro, which changes every season, where, like, the background that he's sliding across is different for what he's doing. So, like, in season 2, it's him filming Secretariat. In season 3, it's, like, the awards ceremonies and all that. In season 4, I don't remember what it is. I think season 4 is the weird kaleidoscope one where it's, like, really trippy. Season 5 is Philbert, like, him on the set.
The Philbert set, which is basically
just his house,
because
which is hilarious because he goes from his house to his
They
house.
modeled the Philbert set after his house. And then season 6 is like the most
now
different
season
one.
6 takes a real turn that I appreciate, because instead of it being like daytime, it starts with the night sky, which is the same stars that like him and Sarah Lynn were looking at the night that she died. And I like how that imagery ends up being used for like alcohol throughout that season, and like addiction, and the idea of like this is what he is reminded of whenever he like looks at this. But yeah, and then the other thing is like that intro for season 6 is basically like a hodgepodge of his life up until that point, where like you see him on the horsing around set, and then
it's like a highlight reel of all the of all the horrible things he's done on the show.
And it's just very fitting, and I always appreciate when an intro can be fluid like that, and like change. It just shows like such a level of creativity, I feel like, to not just slap on like the same thing, the same like whatever you want to call it file of like you're editing the show and you're like, we'll put this in here. It's like, no, they really think about the intro as a part of the show itself, which I appreciate. And then there's a couple of times where it changes. One we'll talk about in season 5, but the other one is when like there are those, it's like that one couple, like one of them is like a psychologist and one of them is a mediator, and they don't want it, like, because of like client privilege or whatever, they don't use the character's actual name, so she refers to BoJack Horseman as Bobo the zebra, and then the entire intro is shifted to be about like Bobo the zebra, so like BoJack looks like a zebra and everything is like recolored, and then even like the title card at the end of the intro says Bobo the zebra, which was just again hilarious. That's just a funny joke that they committed to it, and I really like that.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, I like how they made the decision to make the intro more than just like an advertisement for the show that you're about to watch. Like it's actually a thoughtful part of what's happening in the season.
Yeah.
Up to then.
Well, I've always find even it makes me care about the show more when people change the intro to reflect the season. I know now we're kind of in a period where like a lot of shows don't even have like intros or theme songs, and it's just like one note and the show begins. But I kind of miss, and I'm really nostalgic for, like, whenever a new season of a show came out, they would even, like, change, just, like, in live action things, they would change the shots of the actors to be, like, from the current season. Like, that was my favorite, just to see, like, what they chose and to, like, look out for them in the upcoming episodes. And I know, like, obviously it's different with this animated thing. They, like, fully animated a new thing, which is also just as good. But it gave me that same feeling. And yeah, I really appreciated it.
It also harkens back to almost like a twisted sitcom reality, like you're talking about, like it.
Because he thinks he's in a sitcom
exactly.
Still. We haven't really touched on this, but like in season 1, all he does is rewatch Horsing Around, and like there even at one point he's sitting. When he initially reunites with Sarah Lynn. Around the time they sleep together, they like they spend a day together and go to a theme park, and then they're sitting on a bench looking at the ocean. He goes, shh, shh, like it's now is the perfect time, like the credits are rolling. And she's like, we're in real life. What the fuck are you doing? Like he genuinely is semi-delusional and thinks that real life is kind of like a TV show.
Yeah, well, like it's not really like overtly like he's a crazy person who thinks he's literally living in a TV show, but like he wishes he constantly harkens back to the time when his life was the horsing around
exactly
set. And Sarah Lynn was like basically his daughter on TV.
Exactly. So I'm glad we're on the same page about that, guys. I do have to say, Carol, when you were talking about TV intros, the first thing that came to my mind for some reason was Gilmore Girls. I don't know why, because I've watched a lot of TV shows that have like changing intros, but for some reason I thought of like the Gilmore Girls theme song and like how iconic that song is with the show.
My first thought was Full House and then Gilmore Girls.
But that's kind of what we're talking about.
It's appropriate that your first thought was Full House because Horsing Around is basically...
Yeah, very much. That's very
Guys,
much
though,
why.
I do want to say, because Carol, you were talking about like modern TV intros, and I think my favorite joke, or at least like one of my top 5 jokes in this whole show, is the night of the Philbert premiere in season 5. That episode, the intro is not the intro, or whatever. That it's not the intro to like BoJack Horseman, but they do like a fake intro for what the show Philbert's intro would be, and it's like
and then they don't have the BoJack.
Oh my god! And it is like every like True Detective bullshit, just like guitar strums and like fucking like just some weird image that's being formed, and then you pull away and it's like the image and it's the logo of the show. So funny. That made me laugh so hard because it is like, I think it is like a funny commentary on like how TV show intros have changed and like almost the self-importance of a lot of like modern TV and how they think like they're so fucking cool, which I really appreciate. I really thought that was hilarious.
But we've been foreshadowing Philbert for a while, and we're always like, we'll get to it later. Should we start to talk about what Philbert is exactly now?
Do we want to quickly go over season 3?
Because I think we've like mostly...
so then we can naturally
I forget where
Philbert.
Okay, did we leave off on season 2?
We did, but I think we can summarize through these next two pretty quickly because we've touched on...
They shouldn't be long, yeah. Okay, so season 3, he just is promoting Secretariat.
That's also
Princess
where we get
Carolyn,
that episode of the film festival.
Yeah, great episode.
The Underwater Film Festival.
And he saves a baby seahorse really randomly. Princess Carolyn also starts her own agency. She was kind of taken advantage of at her old one and wasn't doing too great. Princess Carolyn meets a new love interest named Ralph Stilton, who I love and am very upset that she doesn't end up with, but I guess it's okay. Todd gets a new friend named Emily. That's the one who helps him realize he's asexual later, right? Or like with whom he... Okay. Diane gets pregnant and has an abortion with Mr. Peanut Butter. And yeah, that's also the season where Sarah Lynn dies, which we discussed in more detail.
Oh, and also, I completely forgot, but BoJack sleeps with Emily.
Oh, yeah. That's like pretty much the main rift between him and Todd.
Yeah, betrays Todd again.
Poor Todd. I do want to point out, I don't know if it happens in this season, but since you brought up abortion, it kind of just reminded me of some of the issues the show talks on. There's a very funny gun control episode where... like Diane is obviously thoughts and prayers where Diane is obviously very anti-gun but then ends up like using a gun to defend herself and then becomes pro-gun, but then the idea of women being pro-gun is ultimately what results in like government actually having gun control because they're like, well, we can't let women have guns, which is like I think that is the most genius fucking like plot twist and just one of the funniest jokes I've ever seen in a show, which is the only thing that could have, like, cause actual gun control in the U.S. is, like, women wanting to have guns, which was just, like, it's so brilliant. Like, it's actually...
It's a very sad, gigantic...
But it's also, like, like, that actually probably is true in a lot of ways. And it's just, it's a great episode. And then even, like, the B-plot of that episode is they've made, like, this action movie with this, like, female woman.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, after every, like, mass shooting that happens, they have to, like, cut out. And then by the end of the episode, there's, like, 11 seconds of footage left. So they go to, like, play the movie, and then they stop, and they're like, yeah, that's it. That's all we can show without cutting out. Yeah. Anyway, that's a great episode. I highly recommend that episode, and I think it's probably, like, in my top episodes of BoJack. I just think it's, like, hilarious, but also has, like, really relevant social commentary, and it's awesome. It's awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's in season 3 or 4.
It's around here, so yeah.
But around there. But yeah, so that was season 3. Season 4 is the one where we kind of touched on more because it had mine and Marco's favorite episodes. But Mr. Peanut Butter decides to run for office because his ex-wife asks him to. Very random. BoJack returns to his childhood home. We learn more about like his growing up and backstories with his family.
And real quick, that first episode where Mr. Peanut Butter runs, it's BoJack is not in that episode at all because this is on the cusp of Sarah Lynn's death and kind of gets you to wonder where he ran off to. Well,
at the end of season 3, he straight up almost tries to kill himself. Like he's driving and he just takes his hand off the wheel and just like closes his eyes and then ultimately like stops himself. And then sees like
he comes across
a flock of wild horses like running, and then that's
not like I guess it would be the show's version of wild horses, but it's like
okay. Let's put a pin in that. Keep going. I want to bring up something. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean he comes across this group of running horses and he like almost goes to like sort of join them and be like a nomadic, just sort of drifter. But then he gets a call from Diane and then misses his shot. So that's when he decides to drive off to Michigan and start his whole family house rebuilding thing.
Yeah, and so that's when we find out backstory with his family, and his family, surprise, surprise, is fucked. His grandmother had to get a lobotomy.
I know, it's so fucked up.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
Because,
I literally have that bolded in my notes because I was shocked.
And that's because I think the reason was
Her brother was
her
it
son.
her son or brother, I think.
Oh, brother.
That got killed in the war, right?
No, her son died in the war.
Right.
Yeah, and it was
So
BoJack's
mother's
Yeah, BoJack's
sister,
uncle, yeah.
So the mother's or his grandmother's son, BoJack's uncle, got killed in the war. The mother was depressed, and BoJack's grandfather decided to deal with depression, lobotomy, which is very sad. And then that kind of explains why BoJack's mother was also not very kind to BoJack growing up. It also tells the story of how BoJack's mother and father met. They like fell in love and got pregnant and ran away together essentially, but as the relationship progressed, they weren't that close because I think BoJack's father didn't come from a really wealthy family, but BoJack's mother did. The father kind of resented her for that and like cheated on her throughout, and it was a whole thing, and they were never happy and always argued. And I think they were also both addicted to pills and drinking, I think. It was all a mess. Diane starts working at Girl Crush, which seems like it's BuzzFeed.
It's basically BuzzFeed, yeah.
Yeah. Princess Carolyn and lovely Ralph try to have a baby, and there's a really heartbreaking episode where you think that they do have a baby because it's like set in the future. And it's like this little girl talking about like her mother and this heirloom, and it turns out Princess Carolyn actually had a miscarriage. Yeah, it was really sad. And then she just gets upset and tells Ralph to leave her. And Todd meets Hollyhock, and I think eventually BoJack meets Hollyhock. And BoJack has to take care of his mother, who has like dementia or Alzheimer's or something at this point. I think that was the most of that. Does his mother die in this season or the next one? I don't remember.
This season, season 4 ends with his mother, who, again, has dementia, is not in her right mind. BoJack, again, being the narcissist that he is, BoJack and Hollyhock go to visit his mother in this home, and then BoJack decides to try and get attention from his mother, who... It's kind of nebulous. Does she actually not recognize him, or does she have dementia? I'm inclined to think she just has dementia and doesn't recognize him, but he's just being an asshole. He thinks that she's just faking it, so he decides to put on a play of horsing around at this old folks home, which like triggers his mother, who ends up like lashing out. She gets kicked out of the home. BoJack has to take her in, and then she starts drugging Hollyhock to like have her lose weight by putting some kind of like drugs in her coffee that she makes her. And Hollyhock like almost overdoses, which ends up being...
BoJack thinks it's his fault for having the drugs.
Yeah.
Also, I love how BoJack's mother keeps referring to her as Henrietta, and you find out it's because somehow she sees in her that Hollyhock is the daughter of Henrietta, the maid that BoJack's father had the affair with. And you're like, the whole time, you're like, why does she keep referring to her as the old maid?
It's so good. It's such a wonderful, little storytelling thing. Yeah, when it all comes full circle at the end of that season, it's like, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the season, we did, mention this before. We do all think that Hollyhock is BoJack's daughter.
Yes.
And the story is told in a very beautiful way and, through flashbacks that it is not his daughter.
And that's in the Times Era episode that we talked about before.
Yeah, and it ultimately ends with BoJack leaving his mom in this decrepit, awful home, just this disgusting facing an alley old age home, because he just wants nothing to do with her, which I think is the last time we canonically see her, because then she passes away off screen after that in the home.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is
I mean, except for later in the second last.
Yeah, like
episode,
flashback or like
We'll get there.
image,
Yeah.
like mental image wise.
Post-mortem.
Yeah, that's
Also in this season, Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter decide their marriage.
yeah.
isn't
I mean,
working.
it's not. They have a very bad
yeah.
marriage. They have a terrible marriage.
Yes.
I don't know why. Like they ever thought.
But
they
yeah,
could...
now we're on. After this, we're on season 5 with Philbert. So
Philbert time. Season 5.
Philbert time.
Philbert time. Yeah, so now BoJack has a new show, and it's about Philbert. And it's Philbert is a
He's a
spy
detective.
I don't really know exactly what Philbert is,
But yeah, he also kind of lives in a home that looks exactly like BoJack's, which later causes some issues because BoJack gets addicted to some drugs. And that makes it kind of hard for him to tell the show between reality.
yeah.
Because the set is essentially his home, and there's other similarities to his life in the show.
He's
that
also
they
dating
don't
his co-star.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of ends up a mess.
Also, I want to mention that the show is a production for a website called
What time
Is
is
It Right Now?
Yeah.
.com,
It's good.
which also means it's a web series, and Todd ends up being not the CEO, but like the higher up in charge of the show. So he's like above BoJack now,
He's
which
like
I
the
love.
head of advertising or whatever. Like he's
he's corporate.
But at some point, isn't there like a sex robot?
Yes,
that takes
yes,
over?
Todd. Okay, this is maybe my favorite arc in the whole show. Is that Todd has this like emotional relationship with this friend of his, but obviously Emily. She's not asexual. He is asexual. They talk about like would he ever be willing to do that? He says no. He finds it too gross. So Todd builds her a sex robot, and he's like you can just like use this sex robot, and she says no, that's weird. But yeah, this sex robot that only says like profanities and has like dildos flying out of it, and is just like somehow ends up running the company, which is like the funniest thing.
It's because he brings it to work, and it gets into this fake one-way conversation with the CEO, and like through the pre-recorded like sex phrases, it like they're like double entendres, so he like works his way up. And I love how at the end of the season he gets like canceled for sexual harassment, even though it's this sex robot the whole time. Like everyone's oblivious somehow.
My
It's
favorite
so
thing
funny.
is that like he'll say all these like very clearly sexual things that nobody will take in a sexual way, but what ultimately cancels him is something that wasn't even like that sexual. It was like a relatively normal response, but then like the person takes it.
What did he
I
say?
don't remember, but I
what
just
it
remember
was.
like he was saying these really obvious sexual things, and the people would keep finding ways to interpret it in a non-sexual way. But then ultimately he says something that wasn't that sexual, and the person's like, "Hey, wait a minute!" And then like he ends up getting canceled. My favorite thing. I love that.
It's
And then
all over the
Todd
news.
takes him out to like this like woodland area under a tree, and they're going on like a picnic, and then Todd like deactivates him there, and it's like this really sad moment of like, shh, it's gonna be okay, buddy, and it's like it's so funny. It's
so
my favorite
stupid.
Todd arc, I think, in the whole show because it's so ridiculous.
Doesn't Todd end up like starting a war in another country on accident at some point? Like
Oh
Todd
no, that's
has
because
crazy
there's
shenanigans. Oh yeah, Todd has like a twin.
it's
right?
like not a twin, but it's
Well,
someone
they
who
look
looks
very
exactly
similar.
like him from I can't remember the country, but
It's some,
It's
random...
some
Is it
warlord.
I think it's
Cordovia?
Cordovia.
Cordovia. It's also funny because when he's working at whatimesitRightNow.com in his office, he has all the clocks on the wall behind him, and one of them is Cordovian time. But yeah, he gets mistaken for this lookalike from Cordovia who is like a warmonger. And he gets framed for it.
That's another funny Toddism. I love how Philbert, by the way, like we didn't touch on this, but Princess Carolyn, before she knew she had a miscarriage, was going to potentially name her child Philbert if it was a boy. And ultimately, the reason that this show ends up happening is because she comes across this script named Philbert in season 3, and then she like gets BoJack to sign on to it. No, sorry, in season 4, and she gets BoJack to sign on to it, and that's ultimately how the show ends up going. But my favorite thing about the Philbert arc is Rami Malek playing the like wannabe artsy writer, like showrunner for the show. Oh my god. Flip. It's incredible. It's actually incredible. And like some of my favorite visual jokes, because something I like about cartoons is how they'll just like have shit in the background that like if you don't notice it doesn't matter, but they're just funny jokes. And when you go into like his writer's room and he has like his cork board with like the episodes broken out act by act, and like one of the things, it was like act 3 nudity ? That was the only thing under act 3, and it's just like jokes like that it's I love it. And also, this might be a good time to touch on it, but we haven't really talked about the fact that like the voice of BoJack is Will Arnett, for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who's a wonderful voice actor. I really love him. He's Canadian. He has a podcast right now with... I do too. Smartless, you listen to it? Yeah.
I love it.
So he has a podcast with Sean Hayes from Will and Grace, which one of my favorite shows as a kid, fun fact. And
Nice.
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman.
The three of them are like best friends, and they have a podcast together. Anyway, Will Arnett, really funny. But the reason I bring this up is he has talked about in some interview somewhere, I can't remember where, but I remember hearing it, that he really struggled with BoJack and like brought BoJack home with him a lot as a character because of all the like fucked up things that happened in the show. And then I guess to some degree the writers would like then use what Will was going through like in the show again. So I think like all of season 5 and the Philbert thing is kind of a meta reference to what Will Arnett was going through in terms of like having a really hard time dealing with being BoJack in the show and then like having it cross lines with his real life at home. Not that Will Arnett is like a complete scumbag. Like by all accounts he's a decent person that people like, but just like his own personal demons of like alcoholism and
haven't heard anything bad
absolutely
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think even then kind of what happens at the end of the Philbert arc where it's like this huge success, but it's this huge success that like really resonates with assholes, and Diane is like, but that's not like the point wasn't to show this thing and be like it's okay to be this way, which I think is maybe also the BoJack creators and Will Arnett kind of reflecting on maybe some of the earlier episodes of BoJack and being like, no, like you're not supposed to sympathize with this guy. He's a piece of shit. That's the point of the show. So exactly, I do think it's like, it's really meta about the show itself. And I just, it's great. And there's lots of comedy that comes from it because anytime there's any type of like artsy person in like a production setting, it's just really funny to me. I find that stuff really funny because I always just pretend it's like Zack Snyder who thinks he's like really brilliant making something, and yeah, I love all that. So
I got more Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, that's a good call. But, yeah.
We have to mention though, so Philbert, the story of Philbert ends up sort of being Diane finds out that she finds out about what happened between BoJack and Penny and sort of writes it into the script, and that's what leads to what you were saying, Marco, about like Philbert is sort of outed as this like creep, but it's the audience is taking it the wrong way, and the message is no, you're not supposed to sympathize with this person, exactly like what you just said. So that's I think where you were going with that, but also I think the finale of season 5 is Philbert gets season 2 greenlit, and sort of like Philbert and BoJack's real life really start to merge, like we were talking about before, and he thinks that his co-star, who he is living with and sleeping with, named Gina, has stolen his medication that he's like prescribed, but like not really, he's like addicted to, and tries to attack her for it, like physically, and it leads to on set him actually trying to choke her during a take where he's supposed to be faking choking her, and it's basically like they use the take because it looks good and they play it off as, oh, they were just actors, but he was totally trying to murder her on set, and that was like the pinnacle of where his life and the show start to like become like irreparably intertwined.
Yes, and she decides not to press charges because she doesn't want that to define her career, which is so sad.
Yeah.
And she also, that also ends up being one of the reasons why, like the Penny thing, nothing ended up really coming of that too, because Charlotte, like Penny's mother, ends up being like, you don't want this to be like the defining thing in your life. Like let this go, and you're young, and just like keep living your life, because if this comes out, then this is all anyone's ever going to care about. So like that is a theme that comes up a couple times in the show, which
yeah, it's like he ruins these people's lives, and then sort of it's like a catch-22 for them, because if they try and get back at him or make something of it, it almost would ruin their life further, but it's all his fault to begin with. And that even comes up in the season 5 episode where Philbert's premiering, where it's like, I think BoJack says, no one in my life has been hurt by BoJack Horseman more than myself. And then Diane like fires back at him with like, Sarah Lynn, she's literally dead because of you. And that's just one example.
Yeah. And this ultimately, like that ending to season 5 is what pushes BoJack to go to rehab in season 6.
Yes.
Because finally he's just reached this breaking point of like, can't do anything about it. So
yeah, so season 6 starts with BoJack in rehab. Or I guess that's like the end of season 5, but like that's the first episode of season 6.
Sorry, there's a cat near me now, so there might be noises. Okay, the cat ran
Princess
away.
Carolyn?
That's okay.
Not Princess Carolyn. Her name is Moth.
Oh, okay.
Moth?
But my voice scared her away, so
Good.
she's gone now. She's very, the house I'm at has 2 cats, but they're both very, very antsy and take a long time to get comfortable around people, and so it's the first time I've seen them today. But we can go back now. We're in season 6. BoJack is in rehab.
Finally. As you should be.
Finally in rehab. It only took 6 seasons, and a few deaths. And yeah, there weren't a lot of notes. I watched like a recap video, but it was everything up to season 6, because it was like to prepare for season 6. So you guys might have to do the season 6 recap. I remember rehab. I remember his, I don't know, like sponsor, the person who like led the therapy or whatever, ended up getting drunk again.
Yeah, because of BoJack, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, because he had a water bottle with vodka, right?
He kept it to remember how he like corrupted Sarah Lynn into a life of drugs and alcohol, but ultimately that vodka bottle being at rehab got into the hands of the counselor, and he got drunk. Which is a very horrible thing.
A bottle of vodka at rehab was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Who knew?
But season 6 is basically, so it's basically a retrospective season of everything that happened from 1 to 5, and then the rehab is sort of like hit the brakes, we're gonna look back at all the shitty things you've done, and that's sort of the first episode of season 6. And then, like we said, it gets to the, like, he corrupts the life of the counselor, and then that's, I think after that is when those 2 reporters that we were talking about sort of come into the picture, and it starts to become everything that he's done is starting to come to light, and that's the main idea of this final season here, him facing everything that he's done in public, which leads to the expose, which leads to him doing the interviews, both interviews. One went well, the second one is ultimately the reason that he goes into that final downward spiral. In which he super ODs and almost drowns himself in his pool. Sorry,
I was just going to say another funny joke that I appreciate even within all this is when they're sitting in his office and they're trying to figure out, they know there's an expose being written about him, but they don't know what it's about. And so they have all these like whiteboards in his office, and they've just written out every bad thing he's ever done. And just please, like, pause it and just read some of the ways they describe.
That's exactly what I did.
It's so funny because they'll just summarize a truly awful thing with just like one sentence, and it's hilarious. There's so many great. Like,
yeah, but there are also like there's not heavy stuff on there too. Like there's just minor stupid stuff that he's done. I can't think of an example, but it's like some of the worst things you can imagine a human doing, and then just some sort of like minor little things that he considers some of the shittiest things he's done.
Yeah, but this, like we said, this leads up to the penultimate episode of season 6, which ultimately,
which we have not talked about yet.
The emotional climax of the show, and I feel like I don't want to say most people, but like if you look up like best episodes of BoJack, it's probably going to be the number 1. We didn't even. We'll talk about that later. But we forgot an episode from season 5 I want to talk about, but no problem. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, do we want to talk about that?
Let's
quick
talk about this quick. So in season 5, BoJack's mother passes away off screen, and there is an episode in season 5 which, arguably, and like for me, is probably my number 2, maybe number 3 favorite. But I think it's just a great episode where the whole episode is just BoJack giving a eulogy. So he's at a funeral home. You don't see the people he's talking to. It's literally, there's like 2 shots. There's like the shot of him, and sometimes it cuts to like a wide shot where you see him with like the casket. And the whole episode is just like one long monologue for whatever, 25 minutes of him eulogizing his mother. And, you know, there's not a whole lot to say about it other than it's just like brilliantly written. This episode was written by the like show creator, who obviously didn't write every episode, but like would pop in to write or co-write important ones. But he was the credited writer on this episode, and I just think it's a really great episode. But that also ends in a really funny way, which I appreciate, because it's not really a funny episode. It's really like it's a heavy episode where he's dealing with like how he feels about his mom dying, and how like ultimately, even though she was a piece of shit and he didn't care about her, like there's still this weird feeling about it. But then he talks about the story about how he went to go to like get a coffee and a churro or something, and when the lady found out that his mom died, she gave him a free churro. And so anyway, it's like this whole thing, and it's a really wonderful episode. And then it ends he keeps talking about how his mom really wanted like an open casket funeral, and he's like, I'm such a fuck up, I couldn't even give you that. And that comes up like multiple times. And then the episode ends and he's like, you know what, I am gonna give you that. And he goes up to the casket and he opens it and he looks in, and then he looks into the audience and he's like, wait, what I forget what he says. Does he say like, what room am I in or something like that?
He like basically he's in the wrong wake.
Like, is this room like 3B or whatever? And he looks out and the entire audience is just like lizard people, and like the person in the casket is just a lizard. And he just had it just completely over his head. He was just eulogizing, had no idea. God. It's awesome. It's just a great episode.
I like the idea of him going into the other room and giving that entire speech.
Yeah.
25-minute speech.
But anyway, now we should talk about the, again, probably the most famous episode of the show, second last episode, The View from Halfway Down, which I think is a really wonderful name.
Yeah, this is probably my second
favorite.
It's great.
It's a really, like, perfect episode. It's a really wonderful episode. But, so, the episode before this, where does it end exactly? Because I'm just trying to set the stage for what this episode is. Like, where is BoJack?
He breaks into... so... At this point in the show, he doesn't have his house anymore. It's like sold to another family. Yeah. And he is so drunk and high, he doesn't realize, and he breaks into his house. It's not his house, but his old house, and raids all the pills and alcohol, everything he has, gets super, like, just wasted. And then, I don't remember if you see it, but, like, we find out that at the end of that drunken rampage, he... you know what it is?
He calls Diane, doesn't he?
He calls Diane, but also he calls out to Todd thinking he still lives there for some reason. He's like, Todd, why don't we ever go swimming?
Yeah.
And then next episode, which is this penultimate episode, you find out that he is drowning himself, accidentally or on purpose, in his pool.
Yeah.
I think he's just like so out of it, he doesn't know he's drowning. I'm sure he's probably not upset that he's drowning in the mind state that he's in.
At this point.
But I don't think that was his like ultimate end goal. I mean, I'm sure he was maybe trying to kill himself with all the drugs and pills.
Possibly.
I think that might have always kind of been a goal of his deep down because of how much he did it. So he just accidentally ends up in the pool. But we don't know that.
Yeah, the episode starts and he just shows up to this house with Sarah Lynn, who's like a child for some reason and alive. And it's like, this is weird. And they go into the house, and like his mom's there, and his partner, what's his name again? Herb? Like, Herb's there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Herb Pizzazz.
Played
Stanley
by...
Tucci, the Tooch. Love that Tooch.
I wanted Mark to say the
Tooch. Back. So good. And then Cracker Jack, who I believe is played by Lin-Manuel Miranda, is there.
I think so. Cracker Jack is
his uncle,
BoJack's uncle
who died in the war. So he's there. The guy that died from autoerotic asphyxiation is there. I don't know why he's there. That seems like such a random thing, but whatever.
Well, it was BoJack's
Yes,
fault.
I think it's just everyone. Yeah, everyone in his life who has died. So they all go and they sit at this. Oh, Zach Braff, the butler. Of course, we can't forget.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's there.
Just because it's funny.
Everyone in his life who's died.
So they go to this dinner table and they're sitting there and they kind of just like talk about life and like the meaning of life and like if you get
their best moments and
yes,
worst
and like
moments.
if you get because Herb talks about how even after he got kicked off the show, it was like the best time of his life because he did like a lot of charity work and stuff. But then someone else brings up like, well, if you got pleasure out of that, then is it actually like a good deed? Like, can you do a good deed and still get pleasure out of it? Which again, like ties into how a lot of the show is about like performancism and like actually trying to be a good person. And all the while this is happening, there's like this black goo that's like dripping onto BoJack that no one else seems to notice, and he keeps being like, "What? Like, why isn't no one noticing this?" Also, at some point, like Sarah Lynn grows up from being a child to being like adult Sarah Lynn.
And keeps changing
her outfits keep changing, and then his dad shows up, but his dad is Secretariat, which
it's Secretariat with his dad's voice.
Which I think again very obviously is supposed to symbolize how Secretariat was like his main father figure in life. So like in this, what we will soon find out is like a hallucination. Secretariat's there as the figure of his dad. Like those two things are like conflated. But yeah, so it goes on from all this, and then I love that too. I think it's beautiful. And then BoJack says he's like had this dream before. He keeps saying like, yeah, this is a dream. I've had this dream before, whatever. And then at the end of dinner, they say, okay, it's time for the big show. And BoJack's like, yep, and this is the part where I wake up. And then he doesn't wake up. And then they go to this like auditorium where each character kind of gives like a final send-off relating to themselves, and then ultimately falls into this like open door into this black void, and they fall in. And like it happens kind of to each character one by one. The one that's like the most haunting, the one that that the episode gets its name from, is Secretariat reads a poem called "The View from Halfway Down," and it's a poem of his perspective because in the context of the show, Secretariat committed suicide. And it's by jumping off a bridge. And it's him talking about his experience and like his regret once he like the view from halfway down. And then ultimately it ends with just BoJack and Herb. They're the last two talking there, and Herb goes into this void, like the black goo that was dripping on him. It turns out that's what the void is, and it starts to encompass Herb. And BoJack says like, "I'll see you on the other side." And Herb says, "Oh, BoJack, like there is no other side. Like, this is it. Like this was your life, and this is it, and we're done."
Yeah. And BoJack starts like panicking.
Yeah, he starts panicking. At some point, he goes for like a smoke with his dad, who is also Secretariat, and he like sees himself drowning in a pool, and that's when it clues into him like, oh, I'm drowning. But then even throughout this, while everyone's falling into this void, he doesn't have fear because he's like, well, Diane's gonna come save me, because like I remember calling Diane. And then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that he did call Diane, but she didn't pick up, basically.
And also she
lives
in Chicago.
Yeah, she lives in Chicago now.
Yeah.
And
she's now moved on.
Yes.
She's with this guy named Guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually a great relationship.
Yeah,
Love
Guy's
Guy.
great. Yeah, and so
but
BoJack just has this moment where he's like, oh, I guess no one's coming to save me, and the episode ends with him just kind of standing there watching his body drown, and like the black goo just like encompasses him, and you just hear like a flat line noise, and that's the end of this episode. And it's like a perfect little Pitch Perfect episode of the show. I was like, holy shit. Like, but it also is like fucking dark, and like it really like like this show goes to like really dark places. And then it has really funny moments too. Like the next episode after this, there's a lot of funny stuff, but man, it's quite.
But even like in that episode, like it was so smart, because even when they're all sitting at the dinner table, like they're all kind of eating things that relate to their deaths. Like the guy who killed himself with autoerotic asphyxiation has just a lemon on his plate, because that's supposed to heighten orgasm and also wake you up and stop you from dying. And BoJack's plate just has a bunch of pills, and he gets a bottle of water and he drinks it, and he says it tastes like chlorine, which also like is a hint that reminds us like, oh yeah, he's probably in the pool. It was really, really well done.
Yeah, and then but
we see what actually happens after in the next episode.
He's not actually dead.
He lived.
Almost.
Well, I mean, maybe he did die, but like
For a
he doesn't
second.
die in the
Because
long
the
run.
family came who
Yes.
lived there and found him.
Because like we said, it wasn't his house anymore, so the family that does live there walked in on him like mid-death, rushed into the hospital, and he went to prison once he was out of the hospital for
Breaking
it's not
and
really
entering.
specified, just like a bunch of like possession of drugs,
Yeah.
probably
A bunch of stuff.
breaking and
14
entering,
months,
like you
yeah.
said. And I was very glad because I was worried that the final episode would be completely without BoJack and that he would be dead from there on. And I was like, no, that's
Yeah,
too
exactly.
easy for him. Like, for him to just like kill himself or like just die, leaving everyone else behind after everything he's done, that's cheating.
Yeah.
So I was very happy that he survived to live to like actually lead a life that could possibly like show that he's becoming a better person. And that's what the finale is all about. It's
Yeah.
just him reconnecting after this whole kerfuffle
Shenanigans.
with shenanigans. It's him reconnecting with all the major characters in the show.
Well, first it shows him in jail, like putting on plays.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, with the prisoners.
Yeah, teaching the prisoners how to act. But he is still in jail and gets out. He has like a day of release.
It's like a visitor's day.
Yeah.
Because
because
Princess Carolyn's getting
Judah.
married.
Yeah.
Yay.
who is her.
Oh, yeah, we didn't
even talk about
Judah.
him. He was her assistant, who was super devoted and had a man bun and played in a
He was
band.
the most hipster person.
Yeah, but he was really nice
Yeah.
and really attentive and always like cared about her. She fired him at some point, but they reunited and fell in love.
Oh, I also love, so he comes back in that episode with the like the entertainment
Oh my
industry
God.
assistant
That
strike.
is one of my favorite. Yeah.
And there's that scene with Lenny Turtletaub, played by J.K. Simmons, who is this Hollywood producer. And there's like this little representation of Hollywood assistants who are like, our demands are simple. We wish to be treated as human beings or something. And then he's like, it appears we are at an impasse. And that leads to this whole big strike. And then Judah comes in and like puts it all to an end. So that's sort of him re-entering the series. And then it leads to Princess Carolyn hiring him again. And eventually they hit it off and get married.
And that's what brings everyone back together for
Yes,
BoJack
essentially.
to finally, I don't know, not make amends, but to just talk about where they're at. I feel like, it ends with a conversation with him and Diane on the roof.
Yeah. Where she's like, how dare you call me, like, as we said, he called her before, like, drowning himself. And she's like, how dare you put that on me? Because, like, if I have to answer your call now or else it could be your life.
Yeah.
And I love that conversation. But it's also, she's not like she makes the best of the conversation. Like, she accepts what their relationship is, and they kind of just, like, she's like, I'm very happy that you're alive. Like, I'm so relieved to hear that you're not dead, even though it was a really shitty thing for you to be so dependent and be like, it's childish of him to throw his life onto the people around him and take no responsibility, and that's basically the central idea of the whole series. So wrapped up very
and I think that's
nicely.
even like encapsulated in this episode, where we see that everyone, because he kind of just has like a conversation with each main character basically throughout this last episode, and each one of them has their own thing going on. Like, it starts with Mr. Peanut Butter, and it's a bit more comedic and silly, but like he's got his own thing going on. Then like Princess Carolyn, who is getting married, and like they share a dance together, and like she adopted a baby who's a porcupine, which is hilarious.
Which is also, leads to some fun
hijinks.
shenanigans.
And they, but they have like their final encounter, kind of, because she like hints at like working on future projects or whatever, and BoJack starts to get really excited, and she's like, like,
calm down.
let's see, let's just take things one day at a time.
Like, he's still in jail, and this probably isn't healthy for you.
Todd, he has kind of like a final encounter with Todd, which I don't remember exactly what he says now, but I remember really liking it. I thought it was kind of nice.
Well, they're on the beach, and I think Todd is talking about how he reunited with his parents
his mother,
or mother, and like what that taught him and how that happened.
Yeah, and then ultimately it's with Diane, who has the line that I think is kind of like the point of everything, which is that like life, like it doesn't end, like you go through the thing and then you have to keep on living or whatever. Yeah, so it's like there's no like easy answer. Like you just have to like keep living through each day and try to be a better person, and it is what it is, and that's where the show ends. It's also kind of a fitting bookend because the first episode of the show, they have a conversation on the roof of his house. So that's a nice little bookend there.
Yeah, and it's also like there's like a minute of awkward silence between them to cap the show off, which I love. Like you stay on the shot of their conversation until like at least 45 to 60 seconds after they finish talking, just like awkwardly staring up at the night sky. So I love the awkwardness of it because that's where their relationship is at this point. I do
have to ask, what do you guys think? Because this episode, so like we said, the second last episode ends with the flat line. You just hear the flat line and it goes to credits. This episode starts with a quick cut to BoJack and Diane on the roof, and then you cut from that to the hospital. Then you see the whole episode play out, and then they end on the roof talking. And I've always like thought that was an interesting editing choice, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. Like, why do we cut to them on the roof at the start of the episode? Like, what's the significance of that? I don't know, because it seems like you could have just started with him in the hospital, and we just go from there to the end. Don't know why we cut to that so early at the beginning, but
I'm trying to remember, is it like the shot that we see at the end, or is it a different shot?
No, it's the shot that we see. Like, she's in the same dress, he's in the same suit, and they're just kind of like sitting there like looking at the stars, I think, like you said. And that's where the episode starts, and then it cuts from that to him in the hospital, and it's like BoJack's dead, but it turns out like no, he's alive or whatever.
They do a bunch of like quick jokes where it's like zoomed in on a newspaper, like horse dead, and then it zooms out and it's like,
exactly. Yeah. So I've just always wondered like why they start with that, why they start with the end of the episode, and then.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I'm not sure why, other than like there's a whole slew of episodes throughout the entire series that tackle storytelling in a non-linear way. So maybe they're like, this is where the show's going to end, but we're not quite there yet. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. But I do want to... sorry, Carol. I didn't let you say what you were going to
Oh, I have no idea. I just, because I watched it right before this, I remember being like, I'm confused. I don't remember this episode starting this way. And then it went into what I remembered, and then the end, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that too.
Yeah. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was also just going to say I love the editing in this episode, how there's like definitive cuts to black between each interaction with every character. Like each interaction is a separate little chunk of the episode.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that too.
It's just a nice touch.
It's nice. It's distinct from the way a lot of the other episodes play out. There's no real like overarching plot.
No, it's just wrapping up the loose ends.
It's a good final episode. Now that we've talked about the show, I want to ask you guys. Before we get to that, I just need to point out one episode that has been stuck in my brain because it's so fucking weird. But also it's very relevant because this show is about, as we talked about, animals coexisting with humans, and everyone in the show eats. Okay, and there's an episode.
Oh my god,
about
the chicken?
These two chicken farms, and how there are some chickens that are like. You're able to eat, but some that you aren't, because some are sentient and some aren't. It is like bizarre, but I love it. I think it's a great episode, but holy shit, it's like
they're all sentient. The only difference is they separate them haphazardly and pump one half of them full of hormones from birth. And then they send the other half to school. That's the only way it's decided.
Weird. It's a weird episode.
They all start the same way. And there's like a farm, like a chicken farm that's owned by chickens. And they're all like, we're ethical. Obviously, we're chickens. We're going to treat chickens right. Blah, blah, blah. And
but they still die at the end of it.
Yeah, they all die at the end. And like a chicken runs away and Todd falls in love with her. It's batshit crazy.
I love it. I love how like the chicken obviously is just making chicken noises, but Todd will just like come up with what the chicken's saying. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. It's like, I love that. It's so good.
No, other characters understand
I know,
too.
But it's just like, I don't know. It's a bizarre episode, but I really enjoy it. I just thought it would deserve a shout out.
Yeah, it's great. And I love when, I think Becca is the
Yeah.
chicken's name.
Yeah.
And she gets captured and brought back to the farm, and they break into the farm to go get her, and Todd's like, this one, it's her, this is Becca, let's go. And Diane's like, no, Todd, you don't get it.
Yeah.
They're all Becca. And they just like, they lead an exodus of all the chickens off of the
Oh,
farm.
it's so good.
That's a standout episode.
So that
for
leads
sure.
me into something I really want to talk about with you guys about, which is like, what are some of your favorite like guest characters, either as a character or the voice actor or like actress voicing that person? Because one that stands out to me is the police officer that's like always involved, who's in that episode.
Yeah.
Don't know who does the voice,
The cat?
yeah,
I don't
that
know.
police officer is fucking hysterical every time he's in the show because he is so
Yeah.
incompetent, but also like takes his job so seriously.
I already know who my favorite is. It's I think his name is Oxnard, Mr. Peanut Butter's
Yeah.
accountant, the
Who is
meerkat.
voiced, by the way, by Jake Johnson. Yeah.
Jake Johnson.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love Jake Johnson.
And I think my favorite comedic scene is that scene at the beginning of season 3 where he's going to play catch with his son, and he's just like talking about how
Yeah.
great life is like away from work, and Mr. Peanut Butter crashes into his yard and like steals him away, and his son's like, wait, Dad, we were gonna play catch and listen to your favorite Harry Chapin song. You never told me what it was. And he's like, oh, it's Cats in the Cradle, but don't listen to it now. It's too relevant. And he's like, I'm going to go listen to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the scene. This is my favorite comedic scene, I think,
Yeah,
from the show.
I also love that character. I'm sad he doesn't pop up more, but every time he pops up, it's hilarious.
I know.
He's so great.
It's great.
Someone else.
Also,
Yeah.
I've looked it up, and the cat is Officer Meow Meow Fuzzy Face, voiced by Cedric Yarborough.
Okay.
Just for
Well,
reference.
shout out.
I knew it was meow
Yeah,
meow
funny
something.
face. I love the gecko that works at the firm.
Oh.
The one who always
Yeah, and
gets
he's
things
so-
stuck on his
he's
hands.
always
No, he's a tree frog, isn't he?
"Guys, and he's like really nerdy. I love him, and I believe he's actually voiced by the creator of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and his name is
Yeah,
Charlie,
Charlie
Witherspoon.
Witherspoon.
One of my
Yeah.
favorites is Patton Oswalt as
Oh
Pinky
my God,
Penguin.
yes.
He's the
Yeah.
publisher of BoJack's book, and for the whole first season, you see him like getting worse and worse off financially, and he keeps telling BoJack everything is riding on
Yeah.
his book, and like you can't call him, his phone lines are cut, like people are jumping out of the windows of his building because they're doing so poorly.
His office just keeps turning into a shithole.
And I love
more
how
and more.
every time he has like some success, it's always in like a dying industry or field. Like he literally cannot succeed
Yeah.
no matter what he does.
Because then he moves on to the television industry, which is also
Yeah, like
sort
cable
of a dying
TV or whatever.
industry.
He's like, this is the next big
Yeah.
thing. Like we're gonna be great. Yeah, that character's really funny.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there's just
Speaking of Patton Oswalt, that I think it's literally the second episode of the series, but he plays the Navy SEAL,
oh my
the literal
god.
SEAL, who just
gets
wants
in
the
a
box
fight.
of muffins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And BoJack steals the last box of muffins. He's like,
And
"Do you know
eats
who
them
I
all."
am?" And then it's on the news that this Navy SEAL who just got back from deployment only wanted this box of muffins, and this customer stole it from him, and it's this whole big thing.
I love that
Found that really
episode.
funny. I love how Patton Oswalt voices like half the
Oh,
characters.
he's great.
on the
He's
show.
so good. Like I love Patton Oswalt. He's hilarious, and listening to him voice these characters is great. I love one of my favorite side characters is Sextina Aquafina. I just that character is just hilarious, and I think she's hilarious. I don't know who does the voice, but she's great. Angela.
Oh, and
Danielle Gaither.
Okay.
Danielle
Interesting.
Gaither.
The lady that like does BoJack's like press leading up to the Oscars race is voiced by Angela Bassett,
Yeah.
which blew my mind. I was like,
Yeah.
Angela fucking Bassett did a voice on BoJack Horseman? Like, what the shit?
Also, Lakeith Stanfield voiced
Yeah,
Guy. I
yeah.
just saw
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Love him. They have like crazy.
I
People
know,
on
that's
here.
why
Everyone. who's
That's
been
why I
on
wanted
here.
to show some people out, because it's like literally like so many great
Olivia
people.
Wilde's on here. Max.
oh yeah, Olivia
Greenfield.
Wilde does a lot of. Oh, she's Charlotte, I think, and other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She does like various voices.
Hilary Swank played Joey Pogo, who is like the
Yes.
Justin Bieber
Yes, that's
knockoff.
right.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, I love that whole Mr. Peanut Butter and Pickles like cop
Yeah.
storyline
Oh my god.
in season
It's
6.
so where he's like, oh, okay, like You just need to form an emotional attachment with somebody and then sleep with them, and then we'll be even. I love it. It's so funny. Also, I just want to point out Sarah Lynn is voiced by the same person that does the voice of Louise on Bob's Burgers, which is she's a very awesome voice actress. Actually, there's a lot of Kristen Schaal.
She's also a good
I
actress.
mean, I mostly know her from like voice stuff, but yeah, she's just great. I really love her. I think she's hilarious, and I think she's deserves a shout out as well, since we're shouting out people for voices.
She's in like every animated thing.
She's awesome.
Also, honorable mention, RuPaul was in the my favorite episode where the house falls due to fracking.
Yes.
And RuPaul famously fracks on his own property.
Why? What?
So that's
really?
funny.
In real life,
for money.
I didn't know. Are you serious?
Okay, he's like a gay icon and does good things, but like he also wants to be rich, so yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea that was the thing.
Yeah, makes me a little upset, but it's fine.
There's also the woodchuck guy, and his whole story about
Woodchuck Berkowitz.
Yes, and him getting his hands cut off and then getting it replaced with like hands that you later find out belong to a pedophile. So it skews his like presidential run campaign.
Yeah, Woodchuck is incredible. I love just his exasperation at the ridiculousness of what's going on at all times. It's great.
And he's voiced by Andre, I don't know how to say his last name, Brower, the guy who plays the sergeant on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carol, I don't know if you recognize it, but the guy that does Judah's voice is on Veep. He's the guy who's like the external guy that they go to for stuff or something. I forget. It's been a while since I've seen Veep.
Oh, I know exactly.
Yeah. It's
I know exactly who it is. I'm still stuck on Veep. That's currently what I'm watching.
It's good. It's great. Yeah. Oh, fun fact, since you talked about Veep and that made me think of Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I was listening to an interview with the creator of this show, and he was saying that, like, when he was originally pitching this show, in his head, this was kind of like a twisted version of Curb Your Enthusiasm, because he was like, yeah, it's like this guy that's, like, really cynical and, like, hates everything and whatever. Yeah, and it does definitely, like he almost is, like, a Larry David type, but obviously, like, you know, BoJack's like a terrible human being, whereas Larry David is just like neurotic. But that was kind of like one of the initial ideas for like where this character came from and what the show was. So, fun fact.
I also like that you referred to BoJack as a terrible human being.
He's a horse. He's a terrible horse being.
And I think that just goes to... Well, I was just going to say, I think it goes to show, like, how transcendent the character is. That you completely overlook the outlandish fact that this world is, like, populated by a bunch of anthropomorphic animals.
I appreciate that it is easy to forget, but then they do such a good job.
But it's also, like, used in, like, the writing.
One of my favorite jokes is when... like Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane, and this is pretty early in the show, are like having a conversation about like their needs in their relationship or whatever. And then at one point, Diane is like, "Yeah, Mr. Peanut Butter, you're a good boy. You're a good boy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are." And it's like,
but she doesn't even say it like she's saying it to a dog. She says it like in a normal conversation. Like, "You're a good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. Yes, you are."
It's so funny.
Yeah, or just the amount of times throughout the series where his ears pop up when something like makes a sound or something. He sleeps in a dog bed, like a circular, giant dog mattress.
Although also we need to point out that Diane is Vietnamese. They make that very explicit. We meet her family. We go on a journey to Vietnam with her. And is voiced by Alison Brie. All the creators have said that they very much regret that decision. And like in everything they've done since, they make sure to cast like actors and voice actors of color. So, like, at least they learned from their mistake and are actively, like, fixing it going forward, which is not always the case. But I guess it's also not that surprising given, like, the show itself and, like, the themes of the show. Like, I'm not surprised that this team is one who, like, actually took action going forward.
It's, like, an interesting thing that has come up particularly recently, I feel like, in terms of, like, voice acting. Because, obviously, the conversation about... like in general, just like casting people to play what they should be is like been prevalent for a little while, but now it's come up a lot of voice acting, and a big one, I don't know, do you guys watch Big Mouth? Okay, so
Or no, I don't watch it, but I know
Yeah,
exactly
like
what
there's
you're about to say.
by the way, Big Mouth is great. Everyone should watch Big Mouth. We're gonna put that out there. But there's a character in Big Mouth named Missy who is like mixed race, like her mother's white and her father's black, who is voiced by I am spacing.
Oh, I want to read her book.
It's not Jenny Slate, right? Okay,
It
Jenny
is.
Slate, who's white,
Yeah.
who was voicing this character, and then in the most recent season, basically decided that she was going to step down from it because she didn't feel comfortable doing that anymore. And so they actually incorporated it into the show because there's like in the most recent season there was a whole plot about Missy dealing with like being mixed race and like what culture or like race does she like feel more tied to essentially. And then at one point in the show she has like this big crisis and this big existential like moment, and then they switch the voice actors in that episode, and then going forward from that episode she's voiced by now a black voice actress, which was like I was like very awesome. Like I'm glad that you did that. And honestly it was so like not noticeable anyway because Missy has a really distinctive like way of speaking, so like whoever was doing the voice, it was always going to kind of sound the same. So like they probably could have just switched it without saying any, like making it a part of the show. But the fact that they did make it a part of the show, I thought was interesting. But yeah, I never.
Well, there's also.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Sorry, I was just gonna say there's also, I think relatively recently, there was the news that Hank Azaria was gonna stop voicing.
Apu, right?
I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, from The Simpsons.
Another good call.
So. Starting to become more prevalent.
I never realized, maybe this is dumb, like I didn't know who Alison Brie was, like just no context.
Have you never seen Community?
No, I've never seen Community. I had no context for her. I've heard Community. It's really good. That's definitely on my list. So the first time I watched BoJack, I was just kind of like, whatever, Diane, whoever's voicing Diane, like I didn't know like who that was, and then this time I paid a bit more attention, and I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of weird that they specifically call her out for being like Vietnamese. And there's a white woman voicing her, but it is what it is. I do want to say something that I thought was a little weird. Okay, stick with me. Is that Diane is from Boston, right? Like, she's Vietnamese from Boston. They go back to Boston to visit her family. I have never seen, ever, in my life, listen, I've never watched a show, or a movie for that matter, where someone's from Boston and they go back to Boston and Bill Burr isn't a part of their family. Everything I have ever seen when someone returns to Boston, quote unquote, Bill Burr is there. And I just like incepted into my brain the idea that Bill Burr did the voice of one of her siblings, which he doesn't, but it's just so prevalent in my mind, the idea of like, if we're dealing with Boston, Bill Burr is going to be there as a character.
I need examples.
New Girl.
This
New
is
Girl is my
like...
number one example. Like they go to, or is that Boston or Chicago? It might be Chicago they go to in New Girl. They go to, like, Nick, who's Jake Johnson's family, which I think is Chicago, but whatever. Bill Burr's there, and he plays one of the brothers. Anyway, in my head, like, when I think of, like, a person from Boston, I think of Bill Burr. It also doesn't help that Bill Burr has a show called F is for Family on Netflix, which is an animated show. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I just, like, conflated those two things, and I assumed he would be there, which he wasn't. So that's, like, an anti-shout-out, because I wish one of those brothers was Bill Burr.
And one more thing, now that you mentioned her family and her brothers, because there's an episode where her father dies and she doesn't really care. She goes to her family. We see all her brothers. She has, I think, 3 brothers and like so she's human. Her mother's human. Her father's human. 2 of her brothers are human. And then one is like some antelope thing. And they never talk about it. That's like one of the funny moments of like the human and animals coexisting that like maybe means something, but they never focus on it.
I also love how I think that episode is called Live Fast, Diane Nguyen, and it's just the shittiest pun of like Live Fast, Die Young. Like they started trying and they gave up halfway through.
Well, they know no one knows how to pronounce Nguyen anyway, so.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you guys have any others major shout-outs?
I think I've made a point of mentioning every like standout moment that I wanted to talk about, the humorous and the emotional all together.
I just want one shout out to, I like that Diane in the last season realizes she's depressed and goes on antidepressants and gains a bunch of weight, and they draw her to reflect that. And it doesn't end up being that something that in the end she changes or fixates on.
Yeah, I like
she's
that.
Happy, and it doesn't matter that she gained weight because she's not depressed anymore. And I just really appreciated that they did that.
Yeah, I like how they didn't make it her arc to like lose the weight.
Yeah.
Like that it didn't change because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I appreciated that too.
We haven't talked about Diane too much actually this whole thing, which is interesting. Not enough.
Not enough.
I really
a lot happened to Diane.
Yeah, I really enjoy like her whole arc about wanting to write this book of essays about her life and having to come to the realization that like whatever trauma like she wants to write about, it's not actually because it's like necessarily interesting in like a book form, but it's more just like she wants to find a way to rationalize it for herself to make it feel like it was worthwhile, but really it was just the experiences she went on. And now she's like this, like she is like a talented writer that's writing this like series, this young adult series that people respond to, but like having to come to grips with the fact that like this idea she's had in her head of I'm actually really damaged and I have all these amazing stories to tell and it's all going to be worthwhile, and then getting to that point and being like 100% incapable, or not even incapable, but just like there's nothing there. It's just like, here are anecdotes of shitty things that happened to me, and that doesn't necessarily correlate into some big tell-all about like life and existence. I thought was just like a nice arc for her character, who obviously presented in the show as like a talented writer and like deals with that as the show goes on. So yeah, I thought that was a nice little subversion there, a nice way to like something for that character.
And there's that moment towards the end with Princess Carolyn where she's like, I wanted to write this book of essays so that other girls around the world can like, if they're experiencing what I experienced as a kid, they can like find support. And Princess Carolyn says, you can do that with this fictional teen like novel series too. And that's what she ends up doing, and she becomes successful off of that. So it all worked out.
I also do think something else we can maybe quickly touch on before this is done is just the insane timing of the show, because like I talked about a little bit of this when I was doing my rewatch, but they touch on, and they have that whole character Hank Hippopopoulos or whatever, who is very clearly a Harvey Weinstein like fill-in. That happens like a whole.
People say Bill Cosby.
I guess I took it more as like Harvey, because it was more like assistants and like people in the business, like, but
he's like a producer type.
Like one of the major piece of shits. Just throw in a piece of shit's name. But that happens like a year. That episode came out like a year before Me Too happened. But then also so much of where the show ends up going ends up like intertwining with real life stuff, and even like we were talking about the interviews and BoJack being held accountable like in season 6 and whatnot. Like it's just pretty crazy that the timing of the show coming out so closely correlated with real life in a way, and like you think like has to have actually informed a lot of what happened in the show also, for the better. I feel like
I wasn't paying attention to the years of like the seasons I was watching, so I assumed during that Hank Hippopopoulos story arc that was based off of Harvey Weinstein. I didn't know it predated.
Well, at least predated, let's say, like the public knowledge,
major,
you know what I mean? Because it was like everyone talks about how it was like
the
worst kept secret in Hollywood, which I think plays in the episode, because like Diane is like, hey, what the hell, and everyone is like, no, everyone knows this. But well,
because she brings it up casually at like a book tour, and
that's
like the public is like, wait, go back, what happened with him? And she's like, oh yeah, everyone knows this. Like a bunch of people came forward. It's like common knowledge.
So it's kind of fascinating that this
that was also I was just gonna say that was a tragic episode too, because it doesn't end with her taking him down. Like he wins essentially.
Yeah, for sure. Which again, no easy answers in the show to anything. It's like real life. You know what I mean? Scummy people get to keep doing scummy things.
Yeah, but also in the show, I found that it was really smart in that it covered like who was allowed to speak out against him and who chose their career over speaking out against him, and just like the power he holds even over his frickin' current assistant who he got to comply and get Diane into some weird parking lot. Yeah, it was sad. But yeah, Diane did a lot of good
Yeah.
stuff throughout the show.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
One more like funny thing to sort of before we wrap this up. I want to end it on a higher note that I just remembered. I think it's season 3. Season 3 is the season when Todd has that cab company, right? Or like it's like an Uber knockoff, but it's like for women who don't like it's female drivers.
So women feel
that
comfortable.
They're not into.
Yeah.
Yes, when they're getting dropped off, and then it ends up being reversed. He's like, "What if we also have this thing where men can feel safe in like an Uber?" So like it becomes like it completely the purpose is defeated. But anyway, at the end of the season, there's like this huge like Margot Martindale steals BoJack's boat from season 2, and she accidentally crashes into this barge with spaghetti that's being shipped into LA for this restaurant, and then under the sun in the ocean it starts to cook in the ocean water, and it's basically just this really stupid wrap up for the season arc of Todd's cab company and driven by like these fish people, like they're killer whales or something, and so like it's breaking on the news and they're like, we need someone out there right away, and that corresponds to the cabs, and it's like someone who will be able to maneuver the water very easily, which corresponds to him hiring the killer whales as employees. And then the other thing is Mr. Peanut Butter's arbitrary purchase of thousands of spaghetti strainers. He's like, I don't know what these are gonna be used for, but I'm sure they'll come in handy for something. That happens at like the beginning of the season, and then all the way at the end of the season he finally like puts them to use. Just the most convoluted, stupid thing. It's just so funny.
That's one of my favorite jokes, because it's introduced as just like, I bought all these pasta strainers. I don't know what they're going to be used for, but I'm sure they'll be useful. And it comes up, and then
like imagine that story.
Yeah, I know.
Pasta.
Literally, just a thumbtack pasta strainer. That's a really good one.
It must have been so fun to write on this show.
Well, fun, but then also depressing, because you're talking about like the most fucked up things. But...
Yeah. Well, you need these moments to counteract the depressing moments.
Yeah. It's a really good show. I highly recommend. Like I said at the beginning, I feel like as long as you're like above a certain age and you're, probably like mid to late teens to above, there's something in here for you. Not just in terms of humor, because it is hilarious, but just like emotionally, there's like enough going on with everyone's character arcs that there'll be something for you to latch onto. I think it's a very worthwhile show.
Yeah, and I know we like summarized everything, but we should say this now. I'll probably put something at the beginning when I edit, but like trigger warning, like it talks about like suicide candidly and like death and overdose.
Very heavy themes for sure.
Yeah, like, and if you didn't know that, I'll put a warning at the beginning. Because that's probably important.
Also put a spoiler warning, because we totally spoiled the entire series.
Well, yeah. Okay, people need to expect that. How are we going to talk about it without...
This episode was, I think, more for people who have seen it or just don't care about spoilers and want to be convinced. I do think,
though, like, even based on this conversation, like, there's enough stuff in the show that I think it's still worthwhile to watch, even if you haven't seen it.
Even just
because there's so like
for sure.
I had this idea when I was rewatching it where I was like, I'm gonna write down all my favorite jokes, and then after like 3 episodes, I was like, I did that too, and I couldn't. There's too many that are so specific to the scene that they're in that it would just be a note that wouldn't make sense, and I was like, it's just you can't.
Yeah, that's true.
It's too funny.
Like, I have one note that just says Lululemon. Because in the background they have a store that's a knockoff of Lululemon, and they call it Lululemon.
There's so many animal
puns.
So
hilarious.
They're so good. Oh,
man. Anyway.
Yeah. Good show. We all recommend.
I would recommend.
All recommend, yeah.
Do we want to tell the people what we're doing next time?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Also something we're excited about, not a show, so I will have time to rewatch these guys, but we're gonna talk about 2 movies that are not in a series together, but that cover similar themes and are a good like feature, a double feature watch, good pairing that Marco suggested to us, and we agree, and I love both films and really want to rewatch them. So we're gonna do Booksmart and Superbad.
Woo.
Yep.
I'm
I think it's the
very
first
stoked.
time. I don't think we've done like a straight up comedy since like School of Rock.
I'm very
I'm
excited.
excited too. I need some levity after BoJack. The show has wreaked
Yeah.
havoc on me. So
Even the finale, I like was crying, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go talk
Yeah.
about it now.
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, good change of pace, refreshing.
Yeah, so we're gonna laugh.
I have not seen Booksmart yet, so I'm excited.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of stick to form. Someone hasn't seen part of it.
Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah. Yeah, their Booksmart is on Netflix right now. If you're in Canada, which I guess not all our listeners are, but like, whatever. It's on, and
So
so,
is
Superbad.
Superbad,
They're actually
though.
both on Netflix in
Yeah.
Canada. Elsewhere, I'm sure you can stream them somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
they're
We
both
can
very
figure it out.
popular, so not that hard to find.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for
All right, so
listening.
tune in for that.
And thanks for listening. In that order.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Wait, shit.